Hi guys, tonight we leave behind soft mattresses, insulated walls, glowing bedside lamps, and all the tiny comforts that quietly help you drift to sleep without much thought. Instead, you find yourself travelling back about 12,000 years to a world balanced between the end of the last ice age and the beginning of something entirely new. The air feels cooler, the stars shine brighter than you have ever seen, and every sound carries farther through the open landscape. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know where you're listening from and what your local time is. It's always fascinating to see how many different corners of the world gather together for these quiet journeys through history. Now, dim the lights and let your breathing slow as you take your very first careful steps into a night unlike any you have ever known. The first thing you notice is how wonderfully empty everything feels. Not empty in a lonely way. Empty in the sense that there are no roads humming with distant traffic, no porch lights glowing through curtains, and certainly no neighbours arguing over whose turn it is to take the trash out. The world stretches outward in every direction, covered with grasslands, patches of woodland, scattered rivers, and rocky hills that seem to breathe quietly beneath the evening sky. The year, if anyone were keeping calendars, would be somewhere around 10,000 BCE. Humanity has survived the long ice age, although many glaciers still cling stubbornly to distant mountains. Across different continents, groups of hunter-gatherers move with the seasons, following animals, gathering plants, fishing rivers, and adapting to landscapes that continue changing as the climate gradually warms. This much is supported by archaeological evidence collected from countless prehistoric sites across the world. You are part of one small group, not an empire, not a kingdom, not even a village. Just a few families whose entire world could comfortably fit inside a modern city bus. That sounds surprisingly cozy until you remember one important detail. Nobody has invented bedrooms. As the sunlight begins fading, you instinctively start thinking about sleep. Modern habits are difficult to leave behind. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you almost expect a hotel reservation to appear, perhaps a small cabin with fresh sheets. Instead, you receive several curious glances from the people around you. Sleep is not something that simply happens when you feel tired. Sleep requires planning, quite a lot of planning, long before darkness fully arrives. Everyone begins quietly preparing. Some collect branches, others gather dry grasses. A few disappear toward the edge of the trees looking for more firewood. Nobody seems rushed. Yet nobody wastes movement either. Experience has taught them that the night rewards preparation and punishes carelessness. You begin helping gather armfuls of dried plants. The grass scratches gently against your arms. It smells faintly sweet, mixed with dusty earth and the lingering warmth of the afternoon sun. Tiny seeds cling stubbornly to your clothing, which is made from animal hides that feel far heavier than anything hanging in a modern closet. Fashion magazines would probably have mixed opinions, mostly negative ones. Still, the hides serve a purpose. They trap warmth remarkably well once the evening temperature begins dropping. As you walk, the landscape slowly changes colour. Golden sunlight becomes pale orange. Orange becomes soft purple. Then the first stars quietly appear overhead. Without city lights, the sky feels almost unbelievably crowded. Thousands upon thousands of stars emerge until it becomes difficult to find empty patches between them. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a bright river crossing the heavens. You pause for a moment. It is breathtaking. Then someone nearby gently encourages you to keep collecting grass. Even in prehistory, chores have excellent timing. One of the greatest challenges of sleeping 12,000 years ago was surprisingly simple. Finding somewhere reasonably safe. Not perfectly safe, reasonably safe. Researchers studying prehistoric campsites believe early humans carefully selected locations that balanced access to water, nearby food sources, visibility, and protection from weather. Choosing where to spend the night could influence survival itself. You begin noticing the small details that guided these choices. The ground slopes gently enough that rainwater will not collect beneath you. Nearby trees provide some shelter from the wind. Open areas allow people to spot approaching animals before they come too close. The fire can be seen from every sleeping place. Nothing here feels accidental. Every choice comes from generations of quiet observation. Some archaeologists suggest this accumulated environmental knowledge became one of humanity's greatest survival tools, while others argue that adaptability mattered even more than familiar locations. The debate continues because evidence from prehistoric camps often leaves room for multiple interpretations. Either way, experience clearly matters. You certainly would not have chosen this exact patch of ground on your own. You probably would have selected somewhere with a prettier sunset, which sounds lovely until your picturesque campsite floods after midnight. As darkness deepens, you help spread the collected grasses across the earth. This will become your bed. Calling it luxurious would require a truly heroic imagination. Still, it serves an important purpose. The ground steals body heat surprisingly quickly. Even a thin layer of dry vegetation creates valuable insulation between your body and the cool soil. That simple barrier may not feel like much, but after several hours it makes an enormous difference. You kneel to arrange the grasses more evenly. They rustle softly beneath your hands. The scent reminds you of late summer fields. Somewhere nearby, smoke drifts lazily from the growing fire. It carries the comforting smell of burning wood mixed with damp leaves. Tiny sparks float upward before disappearing into the endless darkness above. The people around you speak quietly. Their language is unfamiliar, yet many conversations require remarkably few words. A glance, a nod. Someone hands another person a bundle of wood. A child laughs briefly before settling beside an older relative. Life continues with a peaceful rhythm built through countless evenings just like this one. There is something deeply reassuring about that. History often focuses on great battles, famous rulers, and dramatic discoveries. But most human lives, even 12,000 years ago, were made of ordinary evenings, preparing food, tending fires, looking after children, finding a place to rest. These quiet routines rarely leave behind monuments, yet they shaped humanity just as surely as any king or conqueror who would appear thousands of years later. You lower yourself carefully onto your new bed. It feels uneven, a little lumpy. Several small twigs immediately introduce themselves to your back. You shift slightly. Now different twigs introduce themselves. Progress comes in many forms. The cool air brushes gently across your face while the fire offers welcome warmth against one side of your body. Beyond the circle of light, darkness stretches across the land with calm confidence, reminding you that humans occupy only one small corner of this immense prehistoric world. You take a slow breath. The smell of smoke settles into your clothing. Crickets begin their steady evening chorus. Somewhere far away, an owl calls into the night. Sleep has not arrived yet, but already you understand something important. The hardest part of sleeping 12,000 years ago did not begin after closing your eyes. It began hours earlier, with every careful decision that allowed you to reach this quiet moment safely. And as the fire crackles softly beside you, you realize the night has only just begun. The fire murmurs beside you, never quite silent, never quite loud enough to disturb the peaceful rhythm settling over the camp. Its warmth reaches one side of your body, while the cool night air gently touches the other. You shift slightly on your bed of dry grass, trying once again to negotiate with the determined little twigs beneath your shoulder. The twigs, it seems. have already reached a unanimous decision you are not entirely comfortable. And that is before you even think about where tomorrow night's camp might be. The people around you know something that takes you a little while to understand. A good night's sleep rarely begins after sunset. It begins much earlier, when the day's journey is still unfolding. Choosing where to spend the night is one of the most important decisions your group makes each day. It is not discussed with dramatic speeches or lengthy debates. Instead, everyone quietly notices the landscape. The older members pay particular attention to the direction of the wind, the condition of the ground, nearby water, and the traces left by animals. You begin noticing these details as well. The camp is close enough to a stream that fresh water can be reached with only a short walk. Yet it's not so close that unexpected flooding or thirsty animals are likely to wander directly through the sleeping area. That small difference matters very much. Today, many people happily book hotel rooms with scenic river views. 12,000 years ago, a scenic river view came with the possibility of meeting a large animal that had absolutely no interest in respecting your personal space. You walk with one of the experienced hunters toward the edge of the camp. He kneels beside the soil without saying a word. At first, you see nothing unusual. Then your eyes adjust. A series of hoof prints presses gently into the damp earth. Nearby are smaller tracks made by rabbits and foxes. A little farther away lies the broader print of a much larger animal that visited perhaps a day or two earlier. The ground tells stories. You're simply learning how to read them. Modern archaeologists spend years examining footprints preserved in ancient sediments. Some remarkable sites have revealed the paths of humans walking alongside animals thousands of years ago, offering rare glimpses into daily life. These discoveries help researchers understand how people moved through prehistoric landscapes and how carefully they observe the creatures around them. You begin appreciating just how observant your companions truly are. Nothing escapes their attention. Broken branches, fresh droppings, bird calls, the smell carried by the breeze, everything becomes useful information. If the wind changes direction, smoke from the fire may drift differently through the camp. If birds suddenly become silent, perhaps something larger has entered the area. If insects gather unusually thick near standing water, sleeping there may become an uncomfortable experience before the night is over. You quietly realize that prehistoric camping involves considerably more planning than forgetting your tent poles and driving to the nearest outdoor supply store. There is, unfortunately, no outdoor supply store. There is only experience, and experience is earned one careful evening at a time. As the afternoon slips toward evening once more, the group searches for another temporary shelter. They have remained in this area only briefly because the movement of animals and the availability of edible plants constantly influence where people travel. Most communities at this time are still highly mobile. Permanent farming villages are only beginning to appear in a few regions of the world. For many hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons remains the most practical way to survive. You climb a gentle rise and look across the landscape. Below lies a shallow valley. To one side stretches a patch of woodland filled with sturdy trees. Beyond that, open grasslands shimmer softly beneath the lowering sun. Several possible campsites appear inviting. One seems beautifully sheltered among thick trees. Another offers wide visibility across the plain. A third sits beneath a rocky outcrop. Each has advantages. Each also carries hidden problems. Dense forests provide protection from strong winds, but they also limit visibility. If something approaches during the night, you may hear it before you see it. Open ground allows excellent visibility but leaves everyone exposed to cold breezes that continue blowing long after sunset. Rock shelters seem appealing, especially if rain arrives. Yet loose stones, damp ground, or animals already using the shelter may create entirely new difficulties. researchers continue to question exactly how prehistoric groups balance these competing concerns, because different archaeological sites reveal different patterns. Some camps appear repeatedly occupied over many generations, while others seem to have been used only once before people moved on. The answer probably depended upon local conditions, just as today. There was rarely one perfect solution. You notice the oldest woman in the group slowly scanning the horizon. She watches birds circling overhead. She studies the clouds. She kneels to touch the soil. Nobody interrupts her. Her knowledge carries quiet authority. Perhaps she remembers this valley from decades earlier. Perhaps she recognizes subtle seasonal changes invisible to younger eyes. Knowledge in this world is not stored inside books, it lives inside people. Every safe campsite represents lessons gathered across countless journeys. You find yourself helping gather more branches for another evening fire. The wood varies greatly. Some pieces snap cleanly, others remain slightly damp. The experienced fire tenders separate them almost automatically. Dry wood first, denser logs later. Even this simple task reveals generations of accumulated understanding. The scent of fresh pine drifts through the air as branches are stacked nearby. Resin glistens where limbs have broken, releasing a sweet fragrance that mingles with cool evening breezes. Somewhere overhead, small birds settle into their own nighttime shelters. They seem to know exactly where to sleep. You cannot help feeling slightly jealous. As darkness approaches, the camp begins taking shape. Sleeping places circle the fire. Children remain close to parents. Tools are placed within easy reach. Food scraps are carefully managed rather than scattered carelessly around the camp. Leaving leftovers nearby would be rather like hanging a brightly lit restaurant sign in the middle of the wilderness. The local wildlife would likely appreciate the invitation. You would probably regret sending it. Historians and anthropologists often point out that cleanliness around camps was not merely about comfort. It could reduce unwanted attention from scavenging animals while helping maintain healthier living conditions over time. The evening breeze grows cooler. You wrap your hide cloak a little tighter around your shoulders. Its rough texture feels surprisingly comforting now that the temperature has fallen. Far above, the first stars appear once again. The same stars watched countless generations before you. The same stars will continue shining long after cities, nations, and technologies rise and fall. That thought feels oddly peaceful. The group settles into quiet conversation. Someone repairs a stone tool. Another person carefully examines animal hides. A child traces little circles in the dirt before slowly growing sleepy. The ordinary rhythm of life unfolds without hurry. No one seems eager to rush toward bedtime. Instead, bedtime arrives naturally, woven into the fading light and cooling air. You look around the camp one last time before lying down. Nothing here is luxurious. Nothing here is effortless. Yet every branch, every handful of grass, every carefully chosen location represents an invisible investment in tomorrow morning. You finally understand that finding sleep in this ancient world begins with reading the land itself. The earth quietly offers its advice. You simply have to learn how to listen. Morning arrives gently rather than suddenly. The first thing you notice is not the light. It is the temperature during the night. The warmth stored in the earth quietly disappeared, and the cool air settled over the camp like a thin blanket made entirely of invisible frost. Your nose feels cold, your fingertips feel stiff. Even the dry grass beneath you has become slightly damp with dew. The fire, however, still glows, not with tall dancing flames, but with soft orange embers hiding beneath a blanket of pale grey ash. Someone is already awake. In fact, several people are. You soon discover that the fire is almost never left completely unattended. One person gently kneels beside it, pushing aside the ash with a sturdy stick. Tiny sparks immediately brighten. Another handful of dry twigs is added with patient hands. A small flame appears, hesitates for a moment, then slowly stretches upward as if greeting the new day. You find yourself smiling. It feels strangely comforting to watch. There is no click of a thermostat, no electric kettle beginning its cheerful hum, just careful hands coaxing life back into a fire that never truly disappeared. For your companions, this glowing circle of warmth is far more than a convenient place to cook meals. It is the centre of camp life. It provides heat during cold nights. It offers light after sunset. Its smoke helps discourage some insects. Its presence makes the surrounding darkness feel just a little less overwhelming. Researchers widely agree that controlled use of fire transformed human life long before 12,000 years ago. Evidence from archaeological sites suggests that humans had mastered fire many hundreds of thousands of years earlier. Although scholars continue debating exactly when regular control of fire became widespread among different human ancestors, whatever the exact timeline, by your evening beside this prehistoric camp, fire is as essential as water, perhaps even more so. Without it, the night becomes noticeably harder. As the day unfolds, you help gather fuel. At first, this seems almost relaxing. You stroll through scattered trees, picking up fallen branches while birds chatter overhead. Sunlight filters through leaves, creating shifting patches of brightness across the forest floor. The air smells of pine needles, damp earth, and wild herbs warmed by the morning sun. It is peaceful. Then you begin noticing how much wood everyone collects, quite a lot, far more than you expected. A small bundle that would seem generous during a modern backyard barbecue barely earns a satisfied nod here. The fire must last all evening, then through the night, then into the following morning. That requires planning. Fresh wood cannot simply appear whenever needed. You begin sorting branches according to size. The smallest pieces ignite quickly. Medium branches help establish stronger flames. Large logs burn slowly for hours. Even slightly damp wood has its place. Although everyone clearly prefers dry fuel whenever possible, nothing is wasted. Every branch matters. As afternoon slowly fades toward evening, the camp becomes busy once again. People return carrying armfuls of wood balanced across their shoulders. Children help gather smaller sticks. Even the youngest members contribute in ways suited to their abilities. You notice how naturally everyone works together. No dramatic instructions, no whistles, no printed schedules hanging from trees. The rhythm has been learned through countless seasons. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have often observed similar patterns of shared responsibility. While each culture is unique, cooperation frequently plays a central role in daily survival, especially when preparing for the challenges of night. You begin stacking today's collection beside the fire. The pile grows steadily. Still, nobody seems satisfied. More wood arrives. Then more. You quietly decide never again to underestimate the amount of firewood needed for a single evening. The camp settles as sunset approaches. The fire is lit before darkness fully arrives. This is important. Starting a fire in complete darkness would be considerably more difficult, especially if the evening wind strengthens. Tiny flames climb through the carefully arranged sticks. Dry wood crackles pleasantly. The smell is rich and comforting. Resin pops softly inside pine branches, sending tiny sparks upward into the cooling air. Smoke curls lazily toward the sky. For a few moments it drifts directly toward you. Your eyes water slightly. You cough, not dramatically, just enough to remind yourself that smoke, while useful, is not always polite. That is one of the curious contradictions of prehistoric sleep. The fire protects you. The fire also inconveniences you. Too little smoke allows insects to become bolder. Too much smoke leaves your eyes irritated and your clothes carrying the unmistakable scent of campfire. Modern washing machines remain several thousand years in the future, so the smoky aroma simply becomes part of life. You suspect everyone smells approximately the same, which probably prevents anyone from complaining. As darkness settles, you stretch your hands toward the warmth. The difference is immediate. One side of your body grows pleasantly warm while your back still feels the cool evening breeze. You rotate slowly like a very patient loaf of bread. Nobody laughs. Apparently this is perfectly normal behavior. Nearby, someone places smooth stones close to the edge of the fire. At first you wonder why. Later, after they have absorbed warmth, the stones are moved nearer to the sleeping area, where they continue releasing gentle heat for some time. Some researchers believe heated stones may have been used in various ways at prehistoric camps, although exactly how common this practice was remains uncertain and likely varied between different regions. It strikes you as surprisingly clever, simple, effective, and impossible to buy with overnight shipping. The stars appear once more. Tonight the sky is especially clear. The Milky Way stretches overhead with astonishing brightness, reflected faintly in a nearby stream that flows quietly through the darkness. You hear frogs beginning their evening chorus, somewhere farther away. An owl calls once, then silence returns. The fire continues speaking in its own language of crackles and gentle pops. Its sound becomes almost hypnotic. You understand why people naturally gather around it. Faces glow softly in the shifting light. Expressions change as flames dance. Stories are shared. Tools are repaired. Meals are quietly finished. Even silence feels comfortable here. You notice one person occasionally adding another branch before the flames grow too low. The fire is never simply forgotten. It is watched, fed, respected. Throughout the night, someone will likely wake from time to time to check the embers. Allowing the fire to die completely would mean beginning again with cold ashes in the morning, a task no one wishes to face if it can be avoided. Scholars remain divided on exactly how prehistoric groups organized nighttime responsibilities. Some suggest informal rotations may have existed, while others believe individuals simply woke naturally during the night and tended the fire as needed. Either possibility feels believable as you observe the calm rhythm around you. Sleep itself appears less rigid than modern schedules. There are no alarm clocks waiting to interrupt dreams at precisely 6:30. People sleep when they are tired, wake when necessary, then drift back into sleep again. The fire quietly supports that flexible rhythm. You lie down once more upon your bed of grass. The twigs beneath your shoulder seem slightly less determined tonight. Perhaps you are becoming accustomed to them, or perhaps they have accepted a temporary peace treaty. The warmth from the nearby embers reaches your face. The scent of smoke settles gently into the cool night air, beyond the circle of light. Darkness patiently waits. You close your eyes for a moment. The fire continues breathing beside you, never fully asleep, always quietly awake, just enough to help everyone else rest. You awaken sometime during the night, not because anyone shakes your shoulder, not because an alarm insists that it is time to begin another busy day. You wake because your ears decide they should. For a few moments, you remain perfectly still. The fire has settled into glowing embers once again, painting the nearby faces with a soft orange light that rises and falls with every gentle breeze. Most of the camp is asleep. A few people shift quietly beneath their hide coverings. Someone lets out a slow sigh before settling once more into peaceful breathing. Then you hear it. A rustle. It is faint, almost too faint to notice. Somewhere beyond the edge of the firelight, dry grass brushes against something moving through the darkness. You immediately discover that nighttime sounds feel very different when there are no walls around you. Modern homes soften the world. Windows keep out much of the wind. Roofs absorb the patter of rain. Doors separate your bedroom from countless little noises outside. Here, there is nothing between you and the landscape except open air. Every sound arrives clearly. Every sound seems important. You hold your breath for a moment. The rustling stops. Then another sound reaches you. A slow breeze moves through nearby branches. Leaves whisper softly against one another, somewhere above. A night bird gives a short call before silence settles once again. You realize your imagination is already working much harder than it usually does. Was that first sound simply the wind, or something else? Living 12,000 years ago requires becoming an expert listener. Long before electric lights, security cameras, or sturdy locks, your ears often notice changes before your eyes could. A quiet forest could suddenly become noisy, or perhaps even more unsettling. A noisy forest could suddenly become silent. Both situations deserved attention. Researchers studying both ancient and modern hunter-gatherer societies have noted how closely people observe their surroundings, especially during hours of darkness. Careful listening helps detect changes that might otherwise pass unnoticed. You begin paying attention, not nervously, just carefully. The fire crackles softly. An insect hums somewhere nearby. The stream continues its gentle conversation with smooth stones. Far in the distance comes a long, wavering howl. You feel every muscle become slightly more alert. The sound echoes across the open land before fading into the night. One of the people beside the fire slowly opens his eyes. He listens. He does not panic. He simply listens. After a few moments, he relaxes again. Apparently the howl came from far enough away that no immediate concern is necessary. You quietly follow his example. It occurs to you that confidence in this world often comes from familiarity. Someone who has spent countless nights outdoors recognizes ordinary sounds. Someone unfamiliar with them might assume every squirrel is preparing an elaborate attack. You suspect you currently belong in the second category. The night continues unfolding around you. Gradually, your ears begin separating sounds that had previously blended together. The breeze has its own rhythm. The stream has another. Insects create a steady background chorus. Occasionally an owl interrupts with calm certainty, as though reminding everyone that it has been awake much longer than you have. It is oddly peaceful. You wonder how long it takes before these sounds become comforting rather than unfamiliar. Perhaps not very long. Humans are remarkably adaptable after all. Your distant ancestors spent thousands upon thousands of years sleeping beneath open skies. Modern bedrooms are actually the newcomers in human history. That thought makes you smile. Your expensive mattress suddenly seems like a very recent invention, a particularly luxurious recent invention. The embers glow brighter as someone quietly adds another small branch. The flames return just enough to brighten the camp. No words are exchanged. There is no need. The simple act of tending the fire speaks for itself. Beyond the light, darkness remains complete. Without streetlights or passing cars, the world outside the camp seems almost solid. The stars provide enough light to reveal the outline of distant hills, but not enough to remove every shadow. Your eyes slowly adjust. Shapes begin appearing where before there had only been darkness. A fallen log, a cluster of bushes, the outline of a tree reaching toward the stars. You also notice something else. Your sense of smell becomes more noticeable during the night. The cool air carries scents surprisingly well. You detect damp soil, fresh grass, wood smoke, the faint smell of pine resin. Then, carried briefly on the breeze, comes the scent of animals, not strong, just enough to remind you that your group shares this landscape with countless other living creatures. Many are harmless, some are curious, a few deserve respectful distance. Exactly which animals lived nearby depended greatly on the region. Around 12,000 years ago, humans shared parts of the world with wolves, bears, large cats, wild cattle, deer, and many other species. Some enormous Ice Age mammals still survived in certain places, although many would disappear during the following millennia. Scholars continue to debate the precise combination of climate change and human hunting, that contributed to the extinction of several large prehistoric animals. The discussion remains one of archaeology's most fascinating questions. You find yourself listening once more. This time the sounds seem less mysterious. The breeze rises briefly, grass sways together, branches creak, then calm returns. Your breathing gradually slows. Perhaps this is exactly what your ancestors experienced each night. Not constant fear, constant awareness. Those are not quite the same thing. Fear consumes your thoughts. Awareness simply keeps them gently alert. You imagine how children growing up in this environment would gradually learn each sound. They would recognize familiar bird calls, seasonal insects, and changing weather almost without thinking. Knowledge would arrive one evening at a time, no classroom required. Nearby, one of the children shifts in sleep before nestling closer to a parent. The movement reminds you that people have always found comfort in familiar company. The camp itself creates reassurance. Each sleeping person contributes to the quiet sense of safety. Many eyes, many ears, many years of shared experience. You lie back and watch the stars. Without modern light pollution, they seem endless. The Milky Way glows like a pale ribbon stretching from one horizon to the other. A shooting star flashes silently across the sky. It lasts only a heartbeat. Then it is gone. You wonder whether someone 12,000 years ago made wishes upon such sights, or perhaps they saw entirely different meanings. Nobody here carries a written book explaining the heavens. Instead, stories travel through memory from grandparents to parents to children, night after night. Generation after generation, the fire crackles again, its warmth reaches your face. The rustling you heard earlier never returns. Perhaps it really was only the wind, or perhaps the unseen visitor simply chose another path through the darkness. You will never know. Oddly enough, you're comfortable with that uncertainty now. Not everything requires an answer before sleep can return. The land continues breathing quietly around you. The stars continue their silent journey overhead. The people beside you rest peacefully. You close your eyes once more. This time, instead of listening for danger, you simply listen to the world itself. It is older than cities, older than kingdoms, older than history books, and tonight, it gently sings you back to sleep. When the first pale light returns to the eastern horizon, you discover that your body has learned something during the night. It has learned exactly where every twig was hiding. Your shoulder informs you. Your hips offer their own detailed report. Your neck contributes several thoughtful observations that could probably be summarized as, "We should discuss pillows." You sit up slowly, brushing bits of dry grass from your clothing. The camp is quiet, not silent, but comfortably quiet. Someone feeds another small branch into the fire. A child rubs sleepy eyes while leaning against a parent's shoulder. Thin curls of smoke rise almost straight upward into the still morning air, carrying the familiar scent of wood that has burned through the night. You stretch carefully. Every movement reminds you that the ground has very firm opinions about comfort. Modern mattresses are remarkable things. Most people rarely stop to appreciate them. You might spend several minutes comparing memory foam, spring coils, or cooling gel layers before buying one. 12,000 years ago, the comparison was much shorter. Is this patch of ground slightly softer than that one? Congratulations, you have found luxury. The earth itself presents your first challenge. It looks inviting enough from a distance, smooth, natural, perfectly ordinary. Then you actually lie down. Tiny stones press into your shoulder. A hidden root nudges your lower back. The soil slopes just enough that your body slowly shifts during the night. Even if the surface appears flat, it rarely stays comfortable for long. You begin to understand why choosing a campsite required such careful attention. A few steps in the wrong direction might mean sleeping on damp ground or uneven soil. Neither option sounds especially appealing after several hours. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence suggesting that prehistoric people sometimes prepared sleeping areas rather than simply lying directly on bare earth. Layers of grasses, reeds, leaves, or other plant material appear at several ancient sites, providing insulation and at least a modest increase in comfort. Comfort, of course, is a relative term. A thick layer of dry grass is certainly an improvement. It is simply not the sort of improvement that arrives with a complimentary breakfast buffet. You spend part of the morning gathering fresh grasses with several members of the group. The plants are dry enough to avoid trapping too much moisture, but still flexible enough to create a soft layer when spread across the ground. As you pull handfuls together, the stalks whisper against one another. The scent is pleasant, warm, almost sweet. Tiny insects leap away as you work, disappearing into the surrounding meadow. Sunlight gradually warms your back. Making yesterday's cool night seem surprisingly distant. The people beside you inspect every bundle. Anything damp is set aside. Anything beginning to rot is ignored completely. Fresh, dry material lasts longer and keeps the sleeping area cleaner. Simple choices like these make a noticeable difference over time. You begin arranging the grasses into a broad sleeping mat. It feels oddly satisfying. There is no tape measure, no instruction manual, no helpful video explaining the process in 5 easy steps. Instead, you learn by watching. The older members gently adjust the edges. They add extra material beneath areas where shoulders and hips will rest. They remove sharp sticks almost automatically, spotting them long before you notice anything unusual. Experience quietly improves every detail. Researchers studying prehistoric camps often emphasize that many important skills leave almost no trace in the archaeological record. Stone tools survive for thousands of years. Carefully arranged grass bedding usually does not. That means much of this everyday knowledge must be reconstructed through careful comparison with preserved plant remains, microscopic evidence, and observations of traditional societies. Some historians suggest ancient bedding was more sophisticated than many people imagine, while others caution that evidence varies greatly depending on local conditions and preservation. The debate reminds you how much of ordinary life quietly disappears with time. A king's palace may survive, a family's sleeping place usually does not. As afternoon drifts toward evening once more, clouds begin gathering overhead. Nothing dramatic, just soft grey patches floating across the sky. The breeze cools slightly. You notice everyone paying attention, not with worry, simply with habit. Weather influences everything. If rain arrives, dry bedding quickly becomes damp bedding, and damp bedding is nobody's favourite invention. You help carry freshly collected grasses beneath a rocky overhang where they remain protected from possible showers. The hides used for sleeping are also folded carefully. Animal skins provide valuable insulation. Their fur traps pockets of warm air close to the body, especially during cooler nights. Preparing hides takes considerable skill. Cleaning, scraping, drying, softening. Every stage requires patience. A well-prepared hide may serve for many seasons if cared for properly. You run your hand across one lying beside the fire. The fur feels thick, soft in some places, coarser in others. It carries the faint scent of smoke after many evenings spent near the flames. Oddly enough, that smoky smell has become comforting. Your modern laundry detergent might disagree. You rather like it now. Nearby, one of the older women quietly shakes out a hide before laying it across a prepared bed of grass. A few insects tumble free. She brushes them away without the slightest sign of surprise. Life outdoors comes with very small roommates. Some are welcome. Some are less welcome, most simply exist. As evening settles over the camp once again, you prepare your own sleeping place with greater confidence. First the thicker grasses, then finer layers above them. The hide spread carefully across the top. You smooth the edges with both hands. It certainly looks more inviting than yesterday's arrangement. Whether your back agrees remains to be seen. The fire begins glowing brighter as darkness approaches. Its warmth slowly reaches across the camp. You remove one last pebble hiding beneath your bedding, a tiny victory. One pebble may seem insignificant, until it spends 8 hours introducing itself to your ribs. The people nearby settle into familiar routines. Someone repairs a woven carrying bag, another carefully sharpens a stone blade. Children whisper together before sleepiness gradually overtakes their conversation. The evening unfolds without hurry. You lower yourself onto your carefully prepared bed. This time, something feels different. The ground is still firm, it always will be. Yet the thicker grasses soften the pressure just enough. Your shoulders rest more evenly. The hide keeps cool air from reaching you quite so quickly. You feel warmer, more stable, not perfectly comfortable, but comfortable enough. Perhaps that was the true goal all along. Not perfection, simply enough comfort to let your body recover before another demanding day. The stars appear one by one above the camp. The breeze carries the scent of distant pine trees. The fire crackles softly nearby. You settle deeper into your bed of grass and hide. It is still far from luxurious, yet compared with your first evening here, it almost feels familiar. And in this ancient world, familiarity may be one of the greatest comforts of all. Morning greets you with a sky that cannot quite make up its mind. To the east, pale blue spreads gently above the horizon. To the west, thick grey clouds linger as though they have unfinished business. The breeze carries a cool edge that was not there yesterday. And as you step away from your sleeping place, you notice the grass bending in long, rippling waves. The people around you notice it too. No one points dramatically toward the clouds. No one announces that bad weather is on its way. Instead, they quietly adjust what they're already doing. A few people gather extra firewood while everything's still dry. Others inspect the animal hides, making sure they are folded and protected. Children are encouraged to stay closer to camp instead of wandering through the nearby meadow. You begin to understand another lesson that this ancient world teaches so well. Preparation often looks remarkably ordinary. It is simply today's small effort protecting tomorrow's comfort. The changing climate around 12,000 years ago made life especially unpredictable in many regions. As the last ice age gradually loosened its grip, temperatures rose overall, but they did not do so smoothly. Different landscapes experienced shifting rainfall, changing vegetation, and seasons that could surprise even experienced travellers. Evidence preserved in lake sediments, ancient pollen, and ice cores allow scientists to reconstruct many of these environmental changes with remarkable detail. The world you're visiting is not frozen solid, nor is it the warm landscape that later farming communities would know. It is a world in transition, and transition rarely follows a perfectly tidy schedule. You spend the morning helping gather edible roots near a stream. The soil feels cool beneath your fingers as you loosen it with a simple digging stick. Damp earth releases a rich smell that reminds you of fresh gardens after rain. The work is peaceful. Birdsong drifts through nearby trees. Dragonflies skim across the water's surface, catching flashes of sunlight with delicate wings. For a little while, it's easy to forget that the weather has other plans. By midday, the breeze strengthens. The leaves overhead no longer whisper. They rustle with steady confidence. The clouds thicken until the sunlight becomes soft and silvery. One of the older hunters glances upward for only a moment before quietly changing direction toward camp. No explanation is needed. Everyone follows. You notice how little conversation accompanies these decisions. Knowledge has become instinct. The sky speaks. People listen. By the time you return, the camp is already changing shape. Bundles of dry grass are moved beneath the rocky shelter. Firewood is stacked carefully where rain is least likely to reach it. The sleeping hides are checked once more. Nothing is rushed, yet nothing is delayed either. You lend a hand, carrying several bundles beneath the overhang. The grasses feel pleasantly dry against your arms now. You suspect they would feel considerably less pleasant after an afternoon shower. One overlooked detail surprises many people. Even a small amount of moisture can make sleeping dramatically less comfortable than cooler temperatures alone. Dry air feels crisp. Dry bedding traps warmth. Wet bedding slowly draws warmth away from the body hour after hour. Modern camping enthusiasts know this lesson well, though many only learn it after one memorable weekend outdoors. You silently promise yourself never to complain about a slightly damp towel at home again. The first drops arrive without ceremony, soft, scattered, almost gentle enough to ignore. They darken patches of dust before disappearing. The smell is wonderful. Warm earth greets cool rain with a fragrance so familiar that it hardly seems tied to any particular century. It is one of those scents that has connected human beings across thousands of generations. You pause for a moment simply to breathe it in. Soon the shower becomes steadier. Rain taps softly against leaves overhead. Tiny streams begin forming between stones. The fire, protected beneath a rocky ledge, continues burning with only a little extra smoke. You notice someone adding slightly thicker logs. The denser wood burns more steadily despite the damp air. There is no wasted movement. Each action seems practiced through years of quiet experience. Excavated camps from prehistoric Europe and Western Asia often reveal repeated use of naturally sheltered locations such as rock overhangs and cave entrances. These places offered protection from wind and rain, while remaining easier to defend than completely open ground. Of course. Not every group had access to convenient stone shelters. Some lived in broad plains, others travelled through forests. Many adapted temporary structures built from branches, hides, and available vegetation. Human flexibility may have been one of the greatest survival tools ever developed. Curiously enough, some archaeological sites preserve tiny layers of ash that suggest fires were maintained in nearly the same spots across repeated visits, almost like favourite places around an ancient living room. The thought makes you smile. Apparently humans have always enjoyed sitting in the best seat by the fire. The rain continues through much of the afternoon before gradually easing. When the clouds finally begin drifting apart, everything sparkles, drops cling to every blade of grass, small pools reflect pieces of blue sky between scattered clouds. The air feels noticeably cooler. You reach down to touch the ground where you had nearly prepared a sleeping place earlier. It is damp, far too damp. Without moving those bundles of grass beneath shelter, tonight would have been a long and chilly experience. The older woman who first noticed the changing weather gives the ground only a brief glance. She already knew. Her confidence came from decades of watching skies just like this one. Knowledge such as hers could never be carried inside a backpack. It lived in memory, passed quietly from one generation to the next. As evening approaches, the wind shifts again. Now it comes from behind the rocky shelter instead of across the open valley. The fire burns more cleanly. Smoke rises almost straight upward. The camp settles into familiar routines. Children laugh softly while chasing one another between scattered stones before being called back toward the warmth. Someone carefully mends a hide using bone needles and animal sinew. Another shapes a fresh stone tool with patient taps that echo gently through the cooling air. You spread your bedding across the driest patch available. The grasses remain crisp. The hide still carries its comforting smoky scent. When you kneel, your hands find firm earth instead of mud. It feels like a small luxury. Perhaps the greatest challenge of weather is not dramatic storms. It is uncertainty. You cannot check tomorrow's forecast. You cannot glance at a satellite image. The clouds reveal only what they choose to reveal. Even today, specialists continue refining their understanding of how rapidly climates shifted at the close of the Ice Age. New evidence occasionally adjusts earlier ideas, reminding us that Earth's history is wonderfully complex. You look toward the horizon where the last clouds drift away. Above them, the evening sky clears once more. The first stars begin returning. The air has grown colder after the rain, yet your sleeping place remains dry. The fire glows warmly nearby. You wrap your hide around your shoulders and settle onto the bed you prepared with greater care than ever before. Tonight. Comfort has not come from luck. It has come from paying attention to the quiet language of the wind, the clouds, and the land itself. The weather may always have the final word, but you're slowly learning how to listen before it speaks. The morning after the rain feels wonderfully fresh. The air is cool enough that each breath seems to polish your lungs. Tiny drops of water still cling to blades of grass, catching the early sunlight like countless little mirrors. Birds fill the trees with cheerful songs that make the whole valley seem awake long before the people around you begin moving. For a few peaceful moments, everything feels almost perfect. Then something lands on your arm. It is very small, very light, almost polite, until it decides to bite. You brush it away with a quick flick of your hand. A few seconds later, another one arrives, then another. You begin looking around. The recent rain has left tiny pools of standing water among the rocks and fallen branches. Warm morning sunlight reaches them just enough to encourage clouds of insects into the air. You suddenly realize that the largest danger to a comfortable night's sleep is not always something with enormous teeth. Sometimes it weighs less than a grain of rice. You quietly scratch your wrist, then your ankle, then somewhere behind your neck. It seems the insects have developed an impressive appreciation for your company. No one else appears particularly surprised. The people around you continue preparing breakfast with calm patience, occasionally brushing away tiny visitors almost without thinking. Their movements are so practiced that they hardly interrupt whatever task they're doing. You suspect this is a skill that develops after years outdoors. For now, you're still very much an enthusiastic beginner. Life in prehistoric landscapes meant sharing space with countless insects, mosquitoes, biting flies, ticks, fleas, lice, and many other tiny creatures occupied nearly every environment where humans lived, although they rarely receive as much attention as large predators. These persistent companions probably affected everyday comfort far more often. Their influence extended beyond simple irritation. Anyone who has tried falling asleep while listening to the unmistakable high-pitched whine of a mosquito already understands the challenge. Imagine facing that sound without window screens, or insect repellent, or the comforting knowledge that you can simply retreat indoors. There is no indoors, only the camp. One fascinating clue comes from remarkably well-preserved archaeological discoveries, where ancient combs have been recovered from much later prehistoric settlements. Some were carefully carved with extremely fine teeth, designed to remove lice from hair, while those combs belong to societies thousands of years after your current journey. They remind us that tiny parasites remained unwelcome companions throughout much of human history. You begin wondering what people here do instead. The answer appears surprisingly practical. Several members of the group sit together during a quiet moment in the afternoon. One person carefully examines another's hair. Patient fingers move slowly. Occasionally something tiny is removed. The task continues without embarrassment. Simply another ordinary part of daily life. It reminds you that grooming serves many purposes. Keeping clean feels pleasant. It also helps reduce unwelcome guests. Anthropologists studying traditional communities have often observed that social grooming strengthens relationships while improving hygiene at the same time. A simple act of care becomes both practical and deeply human. You cannot help smiling. Modern friendship might involve sending someone a funny message. Here, friendship may involve helping remove tiny biting insects. Different centuries. Same kindness. As the day grows warmer, the insects become busier. Dragonflies dart gracefully through the air, hunting smaller flies with astonishing speed. Their shimmering wings flash blue and green whenever sunlight catches them. You silently cheer them on. Every mosquito they catch feels like a small victory. Nearby, smoke from the fire drifts gently across part of the camp. You notice something interesting. The insects seem less enthusiastic about flying through the smoky air. The people appear to know this already. Without discussing it, they naturally spend more time near the slow-moving smoke during the busiest hours. Evidence from both archaeology and ethnographic studies suggests that smoke likely offered several benefits beyond warmth and cooking. It could discourage certain insects, preserve food for short periods, and create a more comfortable place to gather, especially during evenings when biting insects became especially active. Of course, smoke solves one problem while creating another. Your eyes water slightly again. The familiar scent settles into your clothing. You briefly wonder if there has ever been a historical period when humans were completely satisfied with their surroundings. Probably not. Give someone perfect weather, and they will discover a pebble in their shoe. Give them perfect shoes, and they will probably mention the mosquitoes. The afternoon passes peacefully. You accompany several gatherers into a nearby woodland where patches of sunlight filter through broad leaves. The forest floor feels soft beneath your feet, covered with old leaves and moss that release an earthy fragrance whenever disturbed. Here the insects change. Fewer mosquitoes, more buzzing flies. Tiny beetles crawl over fallen logs with determined purpose. Spiders stretch delicate webs between low branches. You pause to admire one web sparkling with countless droplets left behind by yesterday's rain. It resembles a necklace made from morning light. The spider sits patiently at its centre. You decide not to disturb either artist or artwork. Back at camp, preparations for another evening begin. The weather remains calm. The firewood is dry once again. Fresh grasses have replaced the damp bedding discarded after yesterday's rain. Everything feels orderly, predictable, comforting, until you notice several people carefully inspecting the sleeping area before sunset. At first you wonder what they are looking for. Then you see them remove a few small stones, a broken branch, several clusters of insects hiding beneath loose vegetation. It's another reminder that a peaceful night begins long before anyone closes their eyes. Every little improvement matters. An overlooked detail is that prehistoric camps were probably kept cleaner than many people imagine. Food waste was valuable. Useful materials were reused. Sleeping spaces benefited from regular maintenance because people understood that comfort and health often depended upon simple habits rather than complicated technology. Exactly how frequently camps were cleaned naturally varied between groups and environments. The archaeological record offers only scattered clues, leaving room for several reasonable interpretations. You help spread fresh grass across your sleeping place. The dry stalks rustle pleasantly beneath your hands. Their warm scent mixes with wood smoke drifting from the growing fire. The sky slowly shifts from bright blue to soft gold. Evening birds call from distant trees before settling for the night. You lie back for a moment before darkness arrives. The ground still feels firm. That has not changed. But your body has changed. You know how to arrange the bedding more evenly. You know which side should face the fire. You know to brush away loose leaves before lying down. Small lessons accumulate quietly, one evening at a time. As twilight deepens, the insects gradually return. You hear their gentle buzzing beyond the edge of the firelight. Some drift too close before changing direction in the smoke. Others remain persistent. You wave away one determined visitor near your ear. It circles once, twice, then finally gives up. You allow yourself a tiny feeling of triumph. Perhaps not every prehistoric battle involves spears. Some were fought with nothing more than a patient hand and good timing. The stars appear overhead once again. The camp settles into peaceful silence. Children drift to sleep beside their families. The fire breathes softly into the cool night air. You pull your hide a little closer, brush one last adventurous insect from your sleeve, and close your eyes. to night. The wilderness has reminded you that even the smallest creatures can shape the human story, not through great battles or famous moments, but through countless quiet nights when a single tiny buzz was enough to keep sleep waiting just a little longer. By now, the camp no longer feels entirely unfamiliar. You still miss pillows, quite passionately in fact. But your hands know where to place the dry grass. Your eyes naturally search for level ground before you even think about lying down. When someone begins gathering firewood in the late afternoon, you instinctively join them without waiting to be asked. Little by little, the rhythms of this ancient life begin settling into you. Perhaps that is one of humanity's oldest talents. Given enough evenings, even the unfamiliar begins to feel like home. As the sun climbs higher, you notice that today's work seems lighter than usual. Food has been gathered successfully over the past several days. Fresh water remains close by. No immediate journeys planned before tomorrow. The mood around the camp is relaxed. Children chase one another through the grass, laughing until an older man gently reminds them not to wander too far. Two women sit together repairing a woven carrying net. Nearby, a hunter reshapes the edge of a stone point with slow, precise taps that echo softly across the clearing. No one appears to be working alone for very long. That catches your attention. Tasks begin with one person. Before long, another joins, then another. Conversation drifts easily between them. Not constant conversation, just enough. A few words, a shared smile. Someone points toward a bird gliding overhead. Someone else quietly passes a useful tool. The work continues almost without interruption. You begin to realize that survival here is rarely an individual achievement. It belongs to the group. Excavations at prehistoric camps often uncover clusters of hearths, tool-making areas, food preparation spaces, and discarded materials arranged in ways that suggest people lived in close proximity. While every community organized itself differently, the archaeological picture consistently points toward shared spaces rather than isolated lives. That shared life continues after sunset. You would imagine sleeping outdoors would feel lonely. Instead, it feels surprisingly communal. As evening approaches, nobody disappears into separate rooms. There are no bedroom doors to close, no upstairs or downstairs, no hallway lights accidentally left on. Everyone prepares for the night within sight of everyone else. The camp slowly gathers inward. The fire becomes its quiet center once again. Children settle close to parents. Older relatives choose familiar places near the warmth. Tools are placed within easy reach before anyone lies down. The arrangement feels almost circular, like the spokes of a wheel gently surrounding glowing embers. You spread your own bedding beside several others. At first, the closeness seems unusual. You can hear people breathing. Someone clears their throat. Another person shifts beneath a hide covering. A child murmurs softly while dreaming. Privacy, at least in the modern sense, hardly exists here. Then you begin thinking differently. Perhaps privacy was never the point. Perhaps companionship mattered more. Sleeping together offered practical advantages. More people meant more ears listening through the night. More body heat remained close to the center of camp. Parents could reach children quickly if needed. Anyone waking to tend the fire naturally kept watch over everyone else as well. Safety grew quietly from togetherness. One small detail surprises many people. Research into traditional societies across different parts of the world has shown that communal sleeping arrangements remained common for much of human history. Individual bedrooms, especially for every family member, are a remarkably recent luxury in many cultures. You glance around the camp, no one appears uncomfortable with the closeness. To them, this is simply life. You wonder how strange modern homes might seem if one of these families could visit them. A separate room for every person. Doors that lock. Beds large enough for only one sleeper. They might assume everyone had argued with one another. The thought makes you smile. As darkness settles, conversation continues around the fire. You cannot understand the words, yet tone communicates surprisingly well. Someone tells a story. You know because hands move gently through the air while several listeners grin. Another person imitates an animal so convincingly that even the children giggle. Laughter rises briefly before fading back into peaceful conversation. It feels warm, not only because of the fire, because of the people. Long before written books, stories travelled by voice, knowledge about landscapes, seasons, animals, and family histories was carried through memory and shared across generations. Evening gatherings around a fire likely provided natural opportunities for teaching as well as entertainment. Exactly what those stories sounded like is impossible to know. Language leaves few traces after thousands of years, yet the desire to tell stories appears almost universal. It is tempting to imagine someone here exaggerating the size of a fish they caught. Human nature has probably been delightfully consistent in certain areas. The meal is simple: roasted meat, edible roots, gathered plants. Nothing arrives on decorated plates. Still, the warmth of freshly cooked food feels deeply satisfying after a full day outdoors. The smoky aroma mingles with the scent of roasted herbs. The fire crackles steadily beside you. Above, the stars begin filling the sky once more as people finish eating. No one rushes away. There is nowhere else to be. Evening unfolds slowly. One person quietly repairs a cracked wooden handle. Another smooths the edge of a bone tool with careful strokes. Children gradually lean against their parents as tiredness overtakes curiosity. You find yourself simply watching. There is an ease to these moments. No glowing screens, no constant notifications, no urgent sense that something important might be happening somewhere else. Everything important is already here. The fire, the food, the people, the night. Of course. This peaceful picture does not mean prehistoric life was easy. Far from it. The day demanded constant effort. Tomorrow will require more. But perhaps that effort makes these quiet evenings feel especially valuable. Several specialists have suggested that strong social bonds may have been one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages. Cooperation allowed knowledge, resources, and responsibilities to be shared across entire communities, rather than carried by isolated individuals. Not everyone agrees about exactly how prehistoric groups organize themselves. Different environments likely encourage different social structures, and the evidence offers only glimpses rather than complete stories. Even so, one truth seems difficult to ignore. People rarely survived entirely alone. The fire begins settling into glowing embers. The conversations grow softer. One by one, voices fade. You stretch out across your bedding. Someone nearby gently adds another piece of wood to the fire before lying down again. No announcement, no ceremony, just another quiet act of care. You notice how reassuring the nearby breathing has become. Earlier in your journey, every unfamiliar sound kept you alert. Now familiar sounds help you relax. A sleeping child sighs. An older man softly snores for a few moments before turning onto his side. The breeze brushes through distant trees. The stream continues its endless conversation with smooth stones beyond the edge of camp. All these sounds weave together into something unexpectedly comforting. You close your eyes. You're not sleeping alone beneath an enormous sky. You are resting among people who have watched over one another through countless evenings just like this one. The ground remains firm. The air remains cool. The wilderness still surrounds you. Yet somehow, in the middle of all that vastness, this small circle of people has created something that feels wonderfully rare. A place where the night seems just a little less dark because no one has to face it by themselves. Tonight arrives with unusual calm. The air hardly moves. The flames rise almost straight upward, as though the wind itself has decided to rest for a while. The stream beyond the camp murmurs with its familiar steady voice. and somewhere in the distance a night bird offers a single quiet call before settling into silence. You finish arranging your bedding almost without thinking. The dry grass is thicker than it was during your first night here. The hide lies smoothly across the top. A few stubborn pebbles have already been removed. You have become surprisingly efficient, not perfect. There is still no version of this experience that would earn 5 glowing travel reviews, but you have learned enough that your body no longer argues with every small inconvenience. The people around you seem in no hurry to sleep. Instead, they remain gathered near the fire. Faces glow softly in the warm light. Hands move as people speak. You still cannot understand their words, yet the rhythm of conversation has become familiar. One person speaks for a while, others listen. A child asks something that makes several adults smile. An older woman answers with patient gestures before everyone grows quiet again. The silence that follows feels comfortable rather than awkward. You begin wondering what fills these evening conversations. Perhaps they speak about tomorrow's journey. Perhaps they remember relatives who are no longer here. Perhaps they laugh about someone's unsuccessful attempt to catch a particularly clever rabbit. Or perhaps, as people have done across nearly every culture, they tell stories that are part memory and part imagination. The fire seems to invite storytelling. Its shifting light softens every face. Its gentle crackling leaves room between sentences. Even today, many people find themselves talking longer around a campfire than they do beneath electric lights. Some habits seem remarkably durable. Long before written language appeared, spoken stories carried knowledge from one generation to the next. Information about dangerous places, seasonal changes, useful plants, and memorable events could be preserved through careful repetition. In many societies, storytelling became one of the most powerful tools for teaching as well as entertaining. You imagine sitting here as a child, night after night, listening, remembering, slowly learning which valleys flood after heavy rain, which berries should never be eaten, which stars appear when colder weather approaches. Lessons wrapped inside stories are often easier to remember. Teachers still know that today. Only now they usually have whiteboards instead of glowing embers. A tiny spark drifts upward from the fire. It twists gently into the darkness before disappearing among the stars. Your eyes follow it. Above the camp, the sky seems endless once again. The moon hangs low tonight, bright enough to cast pale shadows across the ground. Its light reaches far beyond the fire, revealing silver outlines of grasses moving almost imperceptibly in the cool air. You find yourself wondering how people 12,000 years ago understood the moon. They certainly noticed its changing shape. Anyone living outdoors would. Its cycle quietly marked the passing of time long before printed calendars existed. One fascinating observation comes from archaeological sites, where repeated patterns suggest some prehistoric communities may have paid close attention to lunar cycles. Although interpreting these clues remains challenging. Objects marked with repeated notches have inspired many theories, including the possibility that some counted days or phases of the moon. No single explanation has convinced everyone. Ancient objects rarely arrive with helpful instruction manuals. You smile at the thought. Even archaeologists occasionally wish someone had left a note saying, "This stick counts moon phases." Instead, they receive a beautifully carved object and several decades of thoughtful debate. The people around the fire gradually become quieter. One elderly man points toward the sky while speaking. Several younger listeners follow his hand. Perhaps he's explaining a familiar pattern among the stars. Perhaps he's telling a story attached to that constellation. Human beings have always searched for meaning above them. The heavens invite questions. Sometimes they even offer answers. More often, they encourage better questions. Your thoughts drift toward dreams. You've slept outdoors for several nights now. Each dream has felt unusually vivid. Perhaps it is the fresh air, Perhaps it's the constant rhythm of natural sounds. Or perhaps your imagination has simply been busy trying to absorb an unfamiliar world. People throughout history have attached great importance to dreams. Some viewed them as messages, others saw them as memories taking new shapes. Still others considered them reflections of ordinary life. Exactly what hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago believed is difficult to determine, because beliefs leave fewer traces than stone tools or animal bones. Still, discoveries from much later prehistoric societies suggest that symbolic thinking and rich spiritual traditions developed long before recorded history. The exact details remain hidden. The human imagination, however, has always been difficult to overlook. You lie back upon your bedding. The fire warms your face. The cool night brushes gently across your hands. Nearby, someone softly hums a tune unlike anything you've heard before. It has no instruments, no elaborate performance, just a quiet voice rising and falling with unhurried simplicity. The melody blends naturally with the crackling wood. Soon the humming fades. No applause follows. None is needed. It simply becomes another peaceful part of the evening. An easy detail to miss is how darkness changes your sense of time. Without glowing clocks or illuminated screens, the evening stretches differently. You stop measuring minutes instead. You notice changes in the fire, the movement of the moon, the growing heaviness of your eyelids. Time becomes something you feel rather than something you read. Researchers exploring modern communities with limited artificial lighting have observed that natural patterns of light and darkness influence sleep in ways quite different from modern urban life. Evening tends to unfold more gradually, guided by fading daylight rather than scheduled routines. You begin to understand that rhythm. Nobody announces bedtime. Sleep arrives quietly. One person settles beneath a hide, then another. A child curls closer to a parent. The conversations fade into occasional whispers before disappearing entirely. Only the fire continues speaking. Its steady voice never seems hurried. You watch glowing embers collapse gently inward. Tiny sparks appear, fade, appear again. It is impossible to hurry a fire. Perhaps that is one reason it calms the mind. The moon climbs a little higher. Its pale light reaches the edge of your bedding. The stars remain astonishingly bright. You think about all the people who must have looked upward from places like this across countless generations. Different languages, different landscapes, different lives, yet always the same moon, always the same slow turning of the night sky. Your breathing settles into an easy rhythm, the familiar sense of smoke, dry grass, and cool earth surround you. The distant stream continues flowing exactly as it did before you arrived, and exactly as it will after you leave. Your eyes grow heavier. The stories shared around the fire drift softly through your thoughts. Perhaps one of them will follow you into your dreams, or perhaps tonight your dreams will become stories of their own, carried gently across a landscape where memory, imagination, and the quiet night have always walked side by side. The morning begins with a sound that is both gentle and urgent. A baby is crying, not loudly, not endlessly, just enough to let everyone nearby know that something important has interrupted the peaceful rhythm of dawn. You open your eyes slowly. The fire has already been encouraged back into bright flames. Thin ribbons of smoke drift upward through the cool morning air, carrying their familiar scent across the camp. A woman lifts the small child into her arms with practiced ease, rocking gently while another adult quietly prepares food nearby. Within a few moments, the crying fades, the camp breathes again. Watching this simple scene, you realize something that had hardly crossed your mind before. Babies have always been babies. They have never cared whether the year was 2026 or 10,000 BCE when they are hungry. They let everyone know when they are uncomfortable. They make their opinions remarkably clear. and when they decide that 2 o'clock in the morning seems like an excellent time for a conversation, history offers very few successful arguments against them. Parenthood, it seems, has always included a healthy respect for interrupted sleep. You spend part of the morning observing how closely the youngest children remain connected to the adults around them. Infants are rarely placed far away. Most of the time they're carried, held, or resting beside a parent or another trusted family member. Older children move with greater freedom, but even they remain within sight of the group. The arrangement feels natural, practical, comforting. For people living in constantly changing landscapes, keeping children close makes perfect sense. The world beyond the camp contains rivers, uneven ground, unfamiliar plants, and curious animals. A wandering toddler could quickly create an afternoon that no one had planned. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric burials and settlement sites confirms that children formed an important part of hunter-gatherer communities. Their remains, although often more fragile than those of adults, provide valuable clues about nutrition, health, growth, and family life across thousands of years. Those discoveries remind us that childhood is not a modern invention. It is one of humanity's oldest experiences. As the day unfolds, you notice that caring for children belongs to more than one person. A grandmother steadies a young child learning to walk across uneven ground. An older sibling patiently entertains a baby with a smooth pebble and a small piece of wood. A hunter returning from a short trip pauses long enough to smile at two curious children before continuing toward the fire. Responsibility seems to flow naturally through the entire group. Several anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies have observed similar patterns of shared childcare. Although customs differ from one community to another, children often benefit from the attention of parents, grandparents, siblings, and other trusted adults. Growing up, in many cases, is a collective effort. You find the idea quietly reassuring. Modern life sometimes feels remarkably individual. Here, childhood belongs to everyone. By midday, the youngest children have transformed the edge of the camp into their own little world. One carefully stacks small stones, another follows a beetle with complete fascination, crawling after it with patient determination. A pair of children attempts to balance narrow sticks across a fallen log. The structure collapses almost immediately. They laugh, then begin again. You smile to yourself. Children have always possessed an extraordinary ability to invent games from absolutely anything. Give them expensive toys. Wonderful. Give them 3 interesting rocks. Also wonderful. One unexpected clue comes from tiny footprints preserved at several prehistoric sites, in places where soft mud later hardened. The tracks of children remain alongside those of adults, quietly revealing that family life unfolded in the same landscapes where people hunted, gathered food, and built temporary camps. Those footprints feel surprisingly personal. A stone tool tells you what people made. A child's footprint reminds you who they were. The afternoon grows pleasantly warm. Several adults work nearby shaping tools while children watch with wide eyes. One curious little boy reaches toward a sharp stone flake before his fingers touch it. An older woman gently redirects his attention toward a smooth piece of wood instead. No scolding, no raised voice, just quiet guidance. You suspect lessons here are taught through observation as much as explanation. Children watch. They imitate. Gradually, they learn. There are no classrooms. The landscape itself provides the curriculum. Every walk becomes a lesson. Every meal teaches something. Every evening around the fire offers another opportunity to remember. As the sun begins lowering toward the horizon, preparations for the night start once again. This time, however, you pay closer attention to how families organize their sleeping places. Parents remain beside infants. Older children sleep nearby. The smallest members of the camp occupy the warmest and most protected spaces close to the fire. It is a thoughtful arrangement. The fire offers steady warmth. Nearby adults can respond quickly if a child wakes during the night, even in sleep. Care continues. One fascinating detail comes from studies of human sleep itself. Unlike many other mammals, human infants require frequent attention during the night for long periods after birth. That need may have encouraged close sleeping arrangements throughout much of our evolutionary history. Scientists continue exploring how these patterns shaped family life, social cooperation, and even the evolution of human behavior. While no single explanation answers every question, many researchers see nighttime caregiving as an important part of our shared story. The evening meal finishes just as twilight begins spreading across the valley. A baby, content after feeding, rests quietly against a parent's shoulder. Another child fights sleep with impressive determination. Tiny eyes grow heavier. The head nods forward, then suddenly lifts again. You recognize the battle immediately. Across thousands of years, children have displayed astonishing confidence that staying awake just 5 more minutes is an excellent plan. History suggests otherwise. Eventually the little warrior surrenders. The child curls beneath a hide covering, asleep before the stars fully appear. The adults continue talking softly for a while. Someone gently adjusts the sleeping hide covering the baby. Another checks that the fire burns steadily. Every movement seems small, almost invisible. Yet together they create an environment where the youngest members of the community can rest safely. You settle onto your own bedding. The familiar scent of dry grass greets you. The fire crackles quietly nearby. A soft breeze carries the smell of pine through the camp. You notice the peaceful breathing of sleeping children blending with the steady rhythm of adults nearby. There is something profoundly calming about it. Generations resting together beneath one sky. No nursery walls, no baby monitors, only attentive ears, experienced hands, and a community that understands the smallest heartbeat deserves protection. The moon rises slowly above the trees. Its pale light reaches the edge of the camp, where tomorrow's paths disappear into darkness. Tonight, however, no one is thinking about tomorrow. The children are asleep, the fire is warm, the camp is quiet, and for another gentle evening, humanity's oldest lullaby continues. Not a song, not a story, but the peaceful sound of people watching over one another through the long, ancient night. You wake before the sun, not because anyone has called your name, not because a rooster has announced the morning, simply because the darkness itself has begun to change. At first, you cannot explain what feels different. The stars are still overhead. The fire still glows with quiet determination. The people around you remain asleep, wrapped in hides that rise and fall with slow, steady breathing. Yet something has shifted. The eastern horizon is no longer completely black. Instead, it carries the faintest hint of grey, almost too subtle to notice. You watch patiently, minute by minute. The colour grows a little brighter. No clocks tick nearby. No phone tells you it is 5:18 in the morning. Time reveals itself through light alone. That realization feels strangely peaceful. Modern life often measures every hour with astonishing precision. Your calendar reminds you of appointments weeks in advance. Your watch vibrates. Your phone chimes. Even your oven politely informs you that dinner has finished cooking. Here, none of those voices exist. Instead, the sky becomes the only clock anyone truly needs. You sit quietly beside the fading fire while another member of the camp gently stirs the embers back to life. Neither of you speaks. There is no reason to. The morning already says enough. Long before mechanical clocks appeared, human communities organized much of daily life around changing daylight. Sunrise marked opportunity. Dusk encouraged rest. Across countless generations, these rhythms quietly shaped work, travel, and sleep in ways that artificial lighting has only recently begun to change. The first rays of sunlight finally reach the tops of distant trees, almost immediately. The landscape responds, birdsong begins. Not all at once, one bird calls, then another. Soon the valley fills with overlapping melodies, each species greeting the morning in its own familiar voice. The effect is gentle rather than overwhelming. Nature seems remarkably considerate at this hour. Even the breeze arrives softly. It carries the scent of damp earth mixed with pine and fresh grass, cool enough to wake your senses without making you shiver as the camp begins stirring. You notice how naturally everyone adjusts to the growing light. No one hurries. The day unfolds with quiet confidence. Children blink sleepily before stretching beside their parents. Someone adds another piece of wood to the fire. Another person walks toward the nearby stream carrying a simple container. Nothing feels scheduled. Yet, everything happens at roughly the right time. You spend the morning following one of the older hunters across a broad meadow. He pauses often, sometimes to study distant animal tracks, sometimes simply to observe the sky. You follow his gaze. The sun has climbed only a little, yet he already seems to understand how much of the day remains. You wonder how. Then you notice the shadows. Every tree casts a long, dark shape across the grass. As the hours pass, those shadows slowly shrink. You have watched shadows your entire life. You have simply never depended upon them. Here, they quietly measure the passing day. One overlooked clue to ancient timekeeping comes from repeated patterns found at certain prehistoric sites. Objects aligned with seasonal sunlight or prominent landmarks suggest that some communities paid close attention to recurring movements of the sun, especially as later societies began settling more permanently. Whether every hunter-gathering group observed the sky in the same way is impossible to say. People living in mountains, forests, coastlines, and open plains would each have noticed different patterns. The landscape itself became part of the calendar. By midday, the warmth of the sun has replaced the morning chill. The camp hums gently with activity. Stone tools are repaired. Food is prepared. Fresh water is collected. Children invent another game involving smooth pebbles that appears to have absolutely no rules whatsoever. Oddly enough, everyone seems satisfied with that arrangement. You kneel beside the stream to refill a container. The surface reflects bright patches of sky between drifting leaves. Small fish dart through the clear water before disappearing beneath smooth stones. You pause to watch them. The stream has no interest in schedules either. It simply flows. Perhaps there is a lesson hidden there. The afternoon passes almost unnoticed. Without a clock dividing the hours into neat little boxes, time stretches differently. You become more aware of changing light than changing numbers. The breeze cools slightly. The birds grow quieter. The shadows lengthen once again. Even your own body begins anticipating evening before your mind fully recognizes it. Modern sleep researchers have explored how exposure to natural daylight influences human circadian rhythms. Regular patterns of sunrise and sunset help regulate hormones associated with wakefulness and sleep. Artificial lighting, especially after dark, can shift those rhythms in ways our distant ancestors never experienced. You smile to yourself. 12,000 years ago, no one accidentally stayed awake until midnight because they started watching just one more episode. The stars provided excellent entertainment. They simply lacked streaming services. As the sun lowers toward the horizon, the camp gradually gathers inward once again. Nobody announces that bedtime is approaching. There is no evening alarm. The light itself makes the decision. Golden sunlight softens into amber. Amber fades toward violet. The first evening star appears above the western hills. Children grow quieter without being told. Adults finish the last small tasks of the day. Someone quietly spreads fresh grass across a sleeping place. Another checks the stack of firewood gathered that afternoon. The routine has become beautifully familiar. You find your own place near the fire. The bedding feels almost welcoming now. The hide smells faintly of smoke, dry grass, and countless peaceful evenings. Those scents have become part of your understanding of home. The moon rises later tonight, for a while. The stars shine alone, without city lights. They seem almost close enough to touch. You trace familiar patterns across the sky with your eyes, wondering whether someone beside this very fire did exactly the same thing thousands of years ago. Perhaps they recognized different constellations. Perhaps they imagined different stories. Yet the act of looking upward feels timeless. The fire crackles softly. A cool breeze brushes across your face. Someone nearby yawns. Another person quietly settles beneath a hide. The conversations become whispers before fading completely. You notice that your own breathing has slowed. Not because you decided it should, simply because the evening has guided you there. The sky darkens one gentle shade at a time. The stars brighten. The fire glows steadily. There are no glowing numbers telling you the hour, only light becoming darkness, darkness preparing for dawn, and somewhere within that ancient rhythm, your own body remembers something it has known for far longer than history itself, how to follow the quiet turning of the sky. The valley has become familiar enough that you almost forget it is only a temporary home. You know where the stream bends around a cluster of smooth stones. You know which fallen tree catches the first light of morning. You even recognize the crooked pine that always seems to host the loudest birds just before sunrise. Then, without much ceremony, the camp begins to disappear, not because of danger, not because of panic, simply because it is time to move. A few people roll sleeping hides into tidy bundles. Others collect stone tools that had rested beside the fire overnight. The ashes are spread carefully, loose branches are scattered within an hour. The busy little camp that felt so alive yesterday has become surprisingly quiet. You stand for a moment looking around. The place seems smaller already. It is remarkable how quickly a home can return to being just another piece of landscape. For communities living by hunting, fishing, and gathering, movement often followed the changing availability of food, water, and seasonal resources. Staying too long in one place could place unnecessary pressure on the surrounding land. Instead, many groups travelled through landscapes they knew intimately, returning to favoured locations as conditions change throughout the year. Your companions do not appear uncertain about where they're going. No maps unfold, no signs point the way. Instead, people simply begin walking. The path is invisible to you. To them, it's almost obvious. The morning air feels wonderfully fresh. Sunlight filters through scattered trees, leaving shifting patterns across the forest floor. Every step releases the scent of crushed leaves and damp moss. Somewhere ahead, woodpeckers tap patiently against old trunks, while squirrels dart through branches with the confidence of lifelong residents. You adjust the bundle resting across your shoulders. It is not especially heavy. Even so, you quickly appreciate why possessions remain few. Every additional object asks to be carried. Every unnecessary tool demands energy. The mathematics of travel are wonderfully simple. If you must carry it for miles, it had better earn its place. Modern life often encourages the opposite. A kitchen drawer somehow acquires 3 different potato peelers. A closet quietly fills with jackets you forgot you owned. A garage becomes home to mysterious boxes labelled important. No one remembers what is inside. Here, mystery boxes would receive very little sympathy. If nobody can explain why it matters, it probably stays behind. As the journey continues, you begin noticing how carefully the group reads the landscape. One person pauses to inspect fresh animal tracks pressed into damp soil. Another tastes a few leaves before nodding with quiet satisfaction. A young hunter points towards circling birds far beyond the trees. The information passes silently from one person to another. The land itself has become a conversation. Your eyes gradually learn to notice details that escaped you before. A narrow game trail winding between bushes, a patch of edible plants growing where sunlight reaches the forest floor, the faint scent of water long before you hear it. Experience has transformed this countryside into something resembling an open book. You are finally beginning to recognize a few words. Around midday, the group reaches a rocky ridge overlooking a broad valley. The view stretches for miles. Grasslands ripple beneath the breeze like waves across a quiet sea. A narrow river flashes silver through the distance. Scattered woodlands provide patches of darker green among the open country. You stop to admire it. The others do as well. Not because they are sightseeing, because they are evaluating. High ground offers information. From here, animal movements become easier to observe. Smoke from distant natural fires would be visible. Approaching weather can often be recognized sooner. The landscape quietly rewards patience. One detail preserved in several prehistoric regions is the repeated use of elevated viewpoints. Although these places rarely leave dramatic archaeological remains, their practical advantages become obvious once you spend time walking through the terrain yourself. You descend the ridge during the afternoon. The path leads toward a cluster of large stone outcrops rising above the surrounding grassland. At first glance they appear ordinary. Then you notice something. The wind feels weaker. The ground beneath your feet remains dry despite recent rain. A nearby spring provides clean water. The older members of the group exchange brief glances. You recognize those glances now. This place has potential. Camp begins taking shape almost immediately. No one announces assignments. People simply begin doing what needs doing. Branches are gathered, fresh grass is collected, the firewood pile slowly grows. Children explore only as far as adults allow, before returning with pockets full of interesting stones that probably seemed much more valuable 5 minutes earlier. One little girl proudly presents an unusually smooth pebble to her grandmother. The older woman accepts it with complete seriousness, turning it over in her hand before smiling warmly. The pebble is tucked safely into the child's little bundle. You suspect its true value has nothing to do with geology as you prepare another sleeping place. You notice how naturally everyone improves the site. Loose rocks are moved. Sharp sticks disappear. The ground is gently levelled with simple branches. Nobody expects perfect comfort. They simply refuse unnecessary discomfort. It is a subtle difference. A tiny piece of evidence sometimes survives where ancient bedding once rested. Under exceptional conditions, compressed layers of plant material can leave faint impressions or microscopic traces beneath later sediments. They are easy to overlook. Yet they remind archaeologists that many ordinary moments leave surprisingly delicate fingerprints across time. Most sleeping places, however, vanish completely. The people who rested there are remembered only through scattered clues, a few stone flakes, fragments of charcoal, the outline of an old hearth. The rest belongs to imagination guided carefully by evidence. Late afternoon sunlight paints the rocks with warm shades of gold. The new camp already feels welcoming. Familiar routines have transformed unfamiliar ground once again. You spread fresh grass beneath your hide. The scent rises gently into the cool air. Nearby, someone experiments with arranging larger stones around the fire. They reflect warmth while also helping contain rolling embers. Whether every prehistoric group built hearths exactly this way is difficult to know. Different regions developed different habits. Shaped by available materials and local conditions, the surviving evidence offers wonderful glimpses, though never the complete picture. The fire catches quickly, dry branches crackle. Smoke curls upward before drifting across the rocks. Evening birds call from somewhere beyond the ridge. The sky slowly turns amber. You sit quietly, looking around at the new camp. Yesterday this place meant nothing to you. Tomorrow it may already feel familiar. That thought carries a quiet lesson. Home, perhaps, is not always a permanent place. Sometimes it is a circle of trusted faces. A dependable fire, the comforting scent of smoke settling into your clothing. A carefully prepared bed of grass waiting beneath an open sky. The stars begin appearing one by one above the valley. You settle onto your bedding. The ground feels firm but thoughtfully prepared. The fire radiates gentle warmth. Beyond its light, the landscape stretches peacefully into darkness, waiting to reveal tomorrow's paths when morning returns. For now, another temporary home has become exactly what you need. A safe place to close your eyes beneath one more ancient night. You wake before anyone else, at least. That is what you believe for a few peaceful moments. The camp is wrapped in soft blue light. The fire has settled into a bed of glowing embers, their warmth still reaching a surprising distance across the cool morning air. A thin layer of mist hangs above the nearby spring, drifting lazily between scattered rocks before dissolving as the first sunlight touches it. You sit quietly. Nothing hurts very much anymore. That, you realize, is an achievement. Your shoulders have grown accustomed to sleeping on firm ground. Your back no longer protests every morning. Even your feet have adapted to long walks across uneven terrain. The human body is wonderfully patient. Given enough time, it quietly learns. Yet adaptation has limits, as the camp begins waking. You notice an older man rising much more slowly than everyone else. He pauses with one hand resting against a smooth rock. His knees seem stiff. His back remains slightly bent. No one appears surprised. A younger hunter walks beside him toward the fire, carrying part of the older man's bundle without being asked. The exchange lasts only a few seconds. No speeches, no gratitude expected. Simply one person helping another begin the day. You're reminded that prehistoric life demanded extraordinary strength, but strength itself changed with age. Every journey left its marks, every season added another memory to bones and joints. When archaeologists examine ancient skeletons, they often discover signs of lives filled with physical labour, worn joints, healed fractures, and powerful muscle attachments reveal people who walked long distances, carried heavy loads, and repeated demanding movements over many years. Those bones tell quiet stories, not stories of famous victories, stories of ordinary persistence. You spend the morning gathering edible plants along the edge of a woodland. The work feels familiar now. Your hands recognize useful roots. Your eyes notice berries that should be avoided. You even find yourself walking around patches of thorny shrubs before anyone else changes direction, without realizing it. You have begun seeing the landscape differently. A low branch is no longer just a branch. It is something that could scrape your face if you are careless. A loose stone becomes a twisted ankle waiting patiently for the distracted traveller. Awareness grows almost without effort. Even so, accidents happen. One of the younger hunters slips while stepping across damp rocks near the spring. It is not dramatic. He catches himself quickly, still. His palm strikes the rough stone with enough force to leave a shallow cut. Several people glance toward him. One woman walks over carrying a small bundle of leaves gathered earlier. She kneels beside him, cleaning the scrape with water before pressing the crushed leaves gently against the wound. The treatment is calm, unhurried, almost routine, long before pharmacies existed. People learn to recognize the useful properties of many local plants through careful observation and generations of shared experience. Ethnobotanical studies, which compare traditional plant knowledge with archaeological evidence, suggest that prehistoric communities likely possessed an impressive understanding of the natural resources surrounding them. Exactly which plants were used 12,000 years ago varies from one landscape to another. Knowledge followed the land. A forest offered different remedies than an open grassland. A coastline taught different lessons than a mountain valley. The injured hunter flexes his hand after a few moments. Satisfied, he returns to work. The camp continues as though nothing unusual has happened. You quietly admire that balance. The injury is acknowledged, it is treated. Then life moves forward. By midday, the warmth of the sun has settled comfortably across the valley. Children splash carefully at the edge of the spring under watchful eyes. Several adults sit together repairing clothing made from softened hides. Bone needles move steadily through leather with remarkable precision. Tiny stitches appear one after another. You lean closer to watch. The craftsmanship surprises you. Each stitch is small, even strong. One broken seam repaired today may prevent a much larger problem during tomorrow's journey. Small acts of maintenance shape survival. One delightful detail rarely comes to mind when people imagine prehistoric life. Bone needles are astonishingly fine. Some recovered examples are so slender that they resemble modern sewing needles, complete with carefully shaped eyes for threading sinew. Holding one in your hand would probably challenge many assumptions about early technology. Human ingenuity often arrives quietly. It does not always announce itself with towering monuments. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of flowering plants across the camp. Bees drift patiently from blossom to blossom. Butterflies float above the grasses with effortless grace. For a while, everything feels almost timeless. Then you notice the older man again. He has chosen a comfortable place beside the fire, even though the day remains warm. He rubs one knee absent-mindedly while watching the younger members prepare tools for tomorrow. You wonder how many journeys those legs have carried him through, how many winters, how many camps, how many nights beneath unfamiliar skies. His experience cannot be measured in years alone. It lives inside every decision he makes, every glance toward the weather, every quiet suggestion about where to sleep. Perhaps wisdom in this world grows alongside sore knees. Toward evening, the camp becomes peaceful once more. Fresh grasses are gathered for bedding. The firewood pile grows steadily. Someone laughs softly after dropping an armful of sticks that scatter in every direction. For a brief moment, everyone joins the search for runaway branches. Even the smallest child contributes by proudly carrying one tiny stick that is almost comically undersized. It is accepted with complete seriousness. Every contribution matters. As twilight approaches, you spread your bedding near the familiar warmth of the fire. Your hands smooth the grasses almost automatically now. The motions require little thought. Routine has become comfort. A cool breeze drifts through the rocks. It carries the scent of pine, smoke, and clean water from the nearby spring. You settle onto your bed and stretch your legs. They feel pleasantly tired. Not exhausted, simply well used. The human body evolved for movement over astonishing spans of time. Many researchers believe our ancestors regularly covered distances that would surprise modern walkers, adapting gradually to landscapes that offered few shortcuts and even fewer smooth paths. Of course, bodies also wear down. How quickly that happened likely depended upon countless factors, including diet, climate, injury, and simple chance. The evidence offers remarkable insights. It also leaves gentle spaces where imagination must walk carefully beside science. The stars emerge one by one above the darkening valley. Someone quietly adds another branch to the fire. The flames brighten for a moment before settling into their steady rhythm. You think about the older man resting nearby. Tomorrow morning he'll probably rise slowly once again. Someone may quietly help him carry a bundle. No one will consider it unusual, because one day every young traveller hopes to become the older traveller, the one who remembers hidden springs, the one who reads clouds without effort, the one whose stories stretch farther than the road ahead. You close your eyes. The ground beneath you remains firm. The fire remains warm. The night air feels cool against your face. Around you, an entire community rests together, carrying the aches of another day with quiet acceptance. Not because the journey is easy, but because it has always been shared. The morning begins with an unusual feeling. Not worry, not excitement. Something quieter than either. Expectation. You notice it before anyone speaks. The sleeping hides are folded a little sooner than usual. The fire is allowed to burn down naturally instead of being carefully built into a larger flame for cooking. People move with calm purpose, checking bundles, tightening cords made from twisted plant fibers, and looking toward the eastern hills where the land rises into gentle folds. Today is another travel day. By now, you understand what that really means. It is not simply walking, it is carrying your home on your shoulders. You gather your bedding one careful layer at a time. The dry grass that served you well through the night is scattered back onto the earth. It has done its job. There is no reason to carry what the landscape can provide again later. The hide is rolled tightly. A stone knife slips into its familiar place. A small pouch containing useful tools is tied securely. Within a few minutes, everything you truly own rests in a bundle that can be lifted with both hands. The simplicity feels strangely refreshing. There's almost nothing to lose because there is almost nothing unnecessary. Across many prehistoric landscapes, people developed highly portable ways of living. Camps could appear in the evening and disappear by morning, leaving behind only faint traces such as charcoal, broken stone flakes, and tiny fragments of bone. Much of daily life was designed around movement rather than permanence. That explains why so few objects seem decorative. Every item works. Every item earns its place. Beauty exists here. It simply arrives in different forms. The smooth polish of a well-used bone needle, the balanced shape of a carefully crafted spear, the rich colour of a hide softened through patient work. Practical things often become beautiful through skill. You lift your bundle. It feels familiar now, not light, just familiar. The group begins walking shortly after sunrise. The air still carries the cool freshness of early morning. Dew clings to tall grasses, soaking the lower edges of your clothing as you pass. Tiny spiders have stretched delicate webs between stems during the night, each one sparkling with dozens of bright droplets before the rising sun slowly dries them away. The path winds through open woodland. Birdsong accompanies every step. A squirrel pauses on a fallen log to inspect the travellers before deciding that breakfast deserves more attention than strangers. You continue climbing gently uphill. From time to time, someone pauses, not because they are tired, because they are looking. A distant ridge, a line of trees, fresh clouds gathering beyond the horizon. The landscape is read constantly, almost like a familiar conversation that never truly ends. You begin noticing signs that would once have escaped your attention. Broken reeds beside a stream suggest animals passed recently. Fresh shoots push through disturbed soil, where wild pigs may have searched for food. Clusters of berry bushes promise a worthwhile stop later in the season, though not quite yet. Knowledge here is wonderfully seasonal. The same valley changes character every few weeks. To know the land means knowing its calendar. One remarkable pattern has emerged from studies of ancient pollen preserved in lake beds and wetlands. These tiny grains allow scientists to reconstruct changing vegetation across thousands of years, revealing forests expanding, grasslands shifting, and climates gradually transforming as generations of people adapted alongside them. The plants surrounding you belong to a landscape that is still finding its balance after the retreat of massive ice sheets. Nothing remains exactly the same for very long. Around midday, the group reaches a narrow stream crossing. The water flows quickly between smooth stones polished by centuries of movement. There is no bridge. There does not need to be. The older hunters test the footing before helping children cross. Bundles remain high above the water. One little boy hesitates at the edge. The current looks stronger from his height than from yours. An older sister reaches back without a word. He takes her hand. Together they cross carefully. The moment lasts only a few seconds. Then everyone continues walking as though nothing unusual happened. Perhaps that is the quiet beauty of cooperation. The smallest kindnesses often disappear into ordinary life. They leave no monuments, yet they make every journey possible. By early afternoon, the warmth has returned. You stop beneath a stand of broad trees where shade offers welcome relief. The meal is simple: dried meat, gathered nuts, fresh water from the stream. No one seems disappointed. After several days outdoors, plain food carries its own quiet satisfaction. Nearby, children begin collecting unusually shaped sticks. One proudly discovers a branch that resembles a bird with an impossibly long neck. The discovery is admired with complete seriousness. It is difficult not to laugh softly. Imagination requires very little equipment. Among objects recovered from prehistoric sites, archaeologists occasionally find stones, shells, or pieces of mineral that appear to have been collected not for survival, but because someone found them interesting or beautiful. These small discoveries hint that curiosity and appreciation for unusual things accompanied humanity long before cities or written records. You wonder whether the oddly shaped stick might have survived thousands of years if buried beneath the right conditions. Probably not. The memory of the child's smile, however, feels worth carrying. The afternoon journey continues across rolling grasslands. The breeze keeps insects away. Cloud shadows drift slowly across distant hills. You realize something surprising. Walking itself has become restful. Not easy. Restful. The steady rhythm of footsteps leaves room for quiet thoughts. You no longer count the distance, you simply follow. There is comfort in trusting those who know the way. Eventually the group slows. Ahead lies another promising place. A gentle rise protects the area from colder air settling into the valley. Fresh water lies nearby. Scattered trees provide firewood. The ground feels firm beneath your feet. You recognize the familiar signs before anyone begins unloading their bundles. This will be tonight's home. Camp appears almost magically. One moment there is only open land, the next, people move naturally into familiar routines. Grass is gathered. Firewood is stacked. The first spark becomes a small flame. Children explore only as far as patient voices allow. Everything unfolds with quiet confidence. The evidence left behind by camps like this can be astonishingly subtle. A few centimetres beneath the surface, future archaeologists may discover charcoal no larger than a fingernail, tiny fragments of burned bone, or microscopic flakes struck from a stone tool. Each clue is modest by itself. Together they reveal that ordinary lives once filled this forgotten place. You kneel to prepare another bed. The motions feel almost automatic now. Level the ground, remove loose stones, spread the grass, lay the hide carefully across the top. You pause for a moment after finishing. This is perhaps your 7th or 8th sleeping place since beginning the journey. You've stopped comparing each one to a modern bedroom. That comparison no longer seems useful. This bed belongs exactly where it should. The evening breeze carries the scent of wild herbs across the camp. The fire crackles gently. The sky slowly fills with familiar stars. You settle onto your bedding and realize that the hardest part of moving is not leaving a place behind. It is trusting that another good place can always be found. For the people around you, that trust has been built one journey at a time, one valley, one hillside, one peaceful night beneath the open sky. You wake to the gentle sound of someone sweeping the ground with a bundle of leafy branches. The motion is slow, careful, almost rhythmic. Dust rises briefly before settling again, and yesterday's scattered leaves are quietly pushed away from the sleeping area. It is such an ordinary task that you nearly overlook it. Then you remember something. Thousands of years from now, someone will try to understand mornings exactly like this one, not by watching, not by asking questions, but by studying whatever remains after everyone has gone. The thought stays with you as the camp gradually comes alive. Breakfast is prepared beside the fire. Children wander no farther than the nearby spring. A hunter examines the edge of a stone blade. turning it toward the sunlight before making a few careful adjustments. Nothing here seems especially dramatic, and that is precisely the challenge. History often celebrates extraordinary moments. Archaeology, however, spends much of its time searching for ordinary ones. You kneel beside the fire, watching tiny flakes of charcoal drift into the ash. They look insignificant. You could easily brush them aside without another thought, yet under the right conditions, pieces this small may survive long after wooden shelters, woven baskets, and leather clothing have disappeared. A surprising amount of our understanding of prehistoric life comes from things people never intended to preserve. Burned seeds, broken bones, discarded stone fragments. Even microscopic grains of pollen carried by the wind can become quiet witnesses to ancient landscapes. You smile to yourself. It is a comforting reminder. Not every important clue has to be large. As the morning unfolds, you accompany two experienced gatherers beyond the edge of camp. One pauses beside a patch of disturbed earth. At first you see nothing unusual. Then she gently brushes aside loose soil with her fingertips. A tiny stone flake catches the light. It is no larger than your thumbnail. She studies it briefly before placing it with several others. You realize someone shaped tools here long ago. Perhaps days earlier. Perhaps years. Perhaps even generations. Stone tools remain among the most enduring traces of prehistoric life because they resist decay far better than wood, leather, or woven fibers. A single campsite may contain thousands of tiny flakes created while sharpening or shaping blades, allowing archaeologists to reconstruct surprisingly detailed patterns of daily activity. The smallest fragments often prove just as informative as the finished tools themselves. You continue walking through the woodland. Morning sunlight filters through branches overhead, creating shifting patches of gold across the forest floor. The scent of pine mixes with damp moss, somewhere nearby. A woodpecker taps steadily against an old tree. The sound echoes softly through the quiet forest. You pause to listen. The rhythm feels almost like another tool at work, not so different from the careful tapping of stone against stone back in camp. By midday, several people have gathered around a flat rock near the fire. One hunter begins reshaping the edge of a spear point. Tap. Pause. Turn the stone. Tap again. Each strike removes a fragment so thin that it floats gently to the ground. You watch closely. There is very little wasted movement. Experience guides every angle. One careless strike could ruin hours of careful work. The discarded flakes scatter across the ground almost unnoticed. Future archaeologists, however, would be delighted to find them exactly where they land. They reveal where people sat, how they worked, sometimes even which hand they favoured. Tiny details quietly become evidence. You find that thought oddly beautiful. The afternoon grows warm. Several children discover a patch of soft mud beside the spring. Soon, tiny footprints crisscross the damp ground. One child presses both hands into the mud, laughing at the perfect shapes left behind. Within minutes, everyone has forgotten about them. Rain may erase them tomorrow, or perhaps not, under extraordinary circumstances. Footprints have survived for astonishing length of time. Ancient tracks preserved beneath layers of sediment have allowed researchers to glimpse moments that lasted only seconds, yet remained hidden for thousands of years before being uncovered again. Those discoveries feel almost magical. A footprint is wonderfully ordinary. It says only one thing. Someone stood here. Sometimes that's enough. As the afternoon breeze strengthens, smoke from the fire drifts lazily through camp. The familiar scent settles into your clothing once again. You no longer notice it immediately. It has become part of the background, like birdsong or flowing water. Human beings adapt with remarkable speed. What once seemed unusual now feels comfortably familiar. One older woman carefully empties ashes from yesterday's fire into a nearby patch of bare earth. She does not know it, of course, but the layers building beneath this camp are becoming a quiet record of repeated evenings. Ash, charcoal, tiny bone fragments, broken stone. One day they will rest beneath soil, then beneath more soil. Time will continue its patient work. Generations will pass overhead without suspecting what lies below. The landscape keeps remarkable memories. It simply stores them differently than people do. You think about the grand monuments that will eventually appear thousands of years after this journey. Massive temples, stone circles, towering pyramids. Those places naturally capture attention. Yet most human lives unfolded in camps much like this one. Temporary, modest, easily forgotten. Perhaps that makes them even more precious. Because they remind us that history belongs not only to rulers, it belongs to everyone who cooked beside a fire, everyone who repaired a tool, everyone who tucked a child beneath a warm hide before sleeping. Late in the afternoon, a sudden gust of wind scatters several loose leaves across the camp. Children immediately chase them. Within seconds, the game has become wonderfully serious. Each spinning leaf receives determined pursuit. The adults smile but continue working. Joy, it seems, requires very little planning. One quiet puzzle continues to accompany every prehistoric campsite. Many objects were almost certainly made from wood, woven grasses, bark, or leather. Most have vanished completely. Their absence does not mean they never existed. It simply reminds us that nature preserves some materials more kindly than others. Every excavation is shaped as much by what survived as by what disappeared. The evening light slowly softens. The fire brightens. Fresh grasses are spread across sleeping places. You kneel to prepare your own bed with familiar movements. Smooth the ground, remove a stone, shake out the hide. Simple actions repeated enough times begin feeling almost ceremonial. Not because anyone declares them sacred, because routine itself carries quiet comfort. The first stars appear above the darkening hills. You settle beside the fire and look around the camp one more time. Nothing here was built to last forever, yet somehow, pieces of it will. A flake of stone, a grain of charcoal, the outline of an old hearth hidden beneath the earth. Enough for someone, thousands of years from now, to wonder who slept here. Tonight you know the answer. You did. Alongside families who never imagined they would become part of history. They were simply preparing another bed, lighting another fire, closing their eyes beneath another ancient sky. The cold arrives quietly, not all at once. It begins as a gentle coolness resting on your hands before sunrise. Then it settles into the air around your face. By the time the first pale light reaches the eastern hills, every breath has become visible for a moment before disappearing into the still morning. No one comments on it. They simply move a little closer to the fire. The flames answer with soft crackling sounds, sending ribbons of warmth across the sleeping places where everyone reluctantly leaves their blankets of hide. You stretch slowly. The ground beneath you feels firmer than it did a few weeks ago. Perhaps it has not changed at all. Perhaps you have. A child shuffles toward the fire wrapped so completely in animal skins that only a pair of sleepy eyes can be seen. One of the older women laughs gently and adjusts the bundle until a small nose finally emerges into the fresh air. The child sighs with theatrical disappointment. Apparently, even 12,000 years ago, mornings could be deeply inconvenient. Breakfast is quieter than usual. The wind has shifted during the night. It now arrives from the north, carrying a sharper edge that slips through the trees with surprising determination. Several hunters pause between mouthfuls, glancing toward distant hills where the horizon looks unusually clear. The season is turning. You have sensed it for days without fully recognizing the feeling. Leaves have begun changing color. Birdsong has grown less constant. Certain flowers have already disappeared from the meadows. The land is preparing itself. So are the people. Bundles are checked more carefully now. Hides receive closer inspection. Small tiers are repaired before they become larger ones. Extra firewood is collected whenever the opportunity appears. Preparation rarely announces itself with dramatic speeches. It grows from hundreds of ordinary decisions. As the group walks through the valley later that morning, you notice how the sunlight sits lower in the sky. Long shadows stretch across open grasslands even though the day has barely begun. The breeze carries the faint scent of damp earth mixed with drying leaves. Somewhere overhead, a flock of birds passes in a loose formation. Their calls grow fainter as they disappear toward warmer country. You watch until they become tiny moving dots. The journey feels strangely familiar. Not because you have walked this exact path before, because countless generations have noticed these same seasonal signs. The departure of birds, the changing light, the first frosts waiting just beyond tomorrow. Tiny clues guided decisions long before calendars existed. The landscape itself became the calendar. A grove of hazel trees appears ahead. Several people stop immediately. The branches are examined with practiced eyes. Some nuts remain, many have already fallen. Children eagerly begin searching beneath the trees, filling small woven pouches with surprising speed. The task quickly turns into a cheerful competition. One little boy proudly lifts a particularly large hazelnut above his head, as though he has discovered buried treasure. His older brother responds by producing 2. Victory lasts approximately 3 seconds. The quiet forest fills with soft laughter. Much later, scattered nutshells resting beneath ancient soil would reveal meals that no one expected to be remembered. Charred fragments often survive where softer materials vanish, preserving small reminders of ordinary afternoons spent gathering food together. You help fill another pouch. The nuts feel pleasantly smooth in your hand. Each one seems insignificant by itself. Together they represent another day of security. By midday, the sky has become a brilliant blue. The air remains cool despite the sunshine. You climb a rocky hillside where low shrubs cling stubbornly between cracks in the stone. The view from the top is breathtaking. Wide valleys spread in every direction. Forests ripple across distant hills. Thin rivers glimmer like polished silver threads weaving through the land, standing here. You begin understanding why experienced travelers prefer high places. Distance tells stories. Smoke rising many miles away may signal another camp. Dark clouds gathering beyond the hills quietly announce tomorrow's weather. Large herds crossing open ground become easier to follow. The world seems to speak more clearly from above. You rest beside a weathered boulder warmed by the afternoon sun. Its surface is smooth from thousands of winters and summers. Without thinking, you run your fingertips across the stone. It has witnessed more seasons than any person ever could. Long after today's footprints disappear, the hill itself will remain. Time moves differently for rock. The group descends before evening. Another campsite begins taking shape near a stand of sturdy pines. The trees soften the wind. Fallen needles create a pleasantly dry surface beneath your feet. Fresh branches are arranged with care around the sleeping area. The scent of pine fills the cooling air. It is clean, sharp, almost comforting. As darkness approaches, the fire becomes everyone's quiet center once again. Someone adds thicker logs tonight. They burn more slowly. The flames rise steadily, throwing warm orange light across familiar faces. You notice how carefully people position themselves. The younger sleep closest to the warmth. Older members settle where they can easily reach the fire if more wood is needed during the night. Nothing is assigned. The arrangement has been learned through years of shared experience. A hunter quietly hangs damp clothing on a simple wooden frame near the flames. Steam rises gently into the evening air. The smell of wet hide mixes with wood smoke. No one wishes to climb into cold, damp clothing tomorrow morning. One thoughtful choice tonight makes the next sunrise easier. Nearby, Another family places flat stones close to the edge of the fire. They will slowly absorb warmth through the evening. Later, after the flames grow smaller, those stones continue releasing gentle heat long into the night. Such simple habits leave little trace once the camp has vanished. Yet, they speak of careful observation repeated across many lifetimes. You settle onto your bedding. The pine needles beneath the hide provide a subtle softness that surprises you. The wind sighs through the branches overhead. Instead of sounding lonely, it resembles quiet breathing. The stars appear slowly between the dark outlines of the trees. Some shine brightly, others flicker through moving branches as the wind sways the forest. You think back to your very first night beside an ancient fire. Everything had seemed uncertain. Every sound invited questions. Every shadow demanded attention. Now those same sounds feel familiar. The crackle of burning wood, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind moving through needles high above. None of them promise perfect safety. They simply belong here. Perhaps that is what resilience really becomes. Not the absence of hardship, not the certainty that tomorrow will be easy, only the quiet confidence that, whatever tomorrow brings, the camp will rise together, gather its bundles, tend its fire, and continue one careful step after another beneath the same patient sky. Morning arrives with almost no colour. For several quiet moments, the world seems painted entirely in shades of silver and blue. Frost rests lightly across the grasses, turning every blade into a tiny crystal. Even the spiderwebs stretched between low shrubs have become delicate lace, sparkling whenever the first hints of sunlight reach them. You draw your hide a little closer around your shoulders before standing. The cold nips at your fingers. Someone beside the fire rubs both hands together before reaching toward the glowing embers. The warmth arrives slowly. It always does. The oldest member of the camp kneels beside the ashes, adding a handful of dry twigs before placing thicker branches across them. The fire answers with a quiet sigh, then a faint crackle, and finally a cheerful burst of flame. Everyone seems to relax a little. It is remarkable how much comfort can fit inside such a small circle of light. Breakfast passes without hurry. Steam rises from warmed water. A child watches it drift upward, trying unsuccessfully to catch it with both hands. The attempt earns a smile from nearly everyone nearby. Some things never change. Children remain wonderfully optimistic about impossible tasks. As the sun climbs higher, the frost disappears almost as quickly as it formed. Droplets fall from grass tips. The valley begins glowing with autumn colours. Golden leaves flutter gently through the air before settling onto the ground. One lands on your sleeve. You leave it there for a while. It seems content. So are you. The day's walk is shorter than usual. No one appears eager to cover great distances. Instead, the group follows the curve of a shallow river whose clear water reflects drifting clouds with surprising clarity. Fish occasionally disturb the surface, leaving widening circles that slowly fade back into stillness. You find yourself wondering how different this river might look thousands of years from now. Perhaps wider, perhaps narrower, perhaps almost unchanged. Rivers possess remarkable patience. They shape the land grain by grain. People shape it differently. One footprint, one campfire, one forgotten tool. Neither works quickly. Both leave lasting impressions. Near midday, you stop beside a broad gravel bank where the current slows. Several hunters kneel, studying the water without speaking. The fish are easier to see here. Sunlight reaches the shallow bottom, revealing smooth stones in shades of grey, brown, and pale green. One stone catches your attention. It is almost perfectly round. You pick it up simply because it feels pleasant in your hand. It serves no obvious purpose. You turn it over once or twice before slipping it into your pouch. Perhaps you will keep it. Perhaps tomorrow you will place it back beside another stream. Either choice feels perfectly reasonable. now and then. Ancient camps reveal shells carried far from the nearest coastline, unusually shaped stones gathered from distant hills, or pieces of colourful mineral with no practical use. Such quiet discoveries remind us that curiosity has always travelled alongside necessity. You smile at your own smooth stone. Some habits, it seems, are timeless. The afternoon unfolds at an easy pace. Several people pause to mend clothing while others gather fallen branches. A young girl carefully untangles a strip of leather that somehow tied itself into an impressive knot. She studies it with complete seriousness. An older man watches for a moment before gently pointing out the loose end. The knot surrenders almost immediately. He says nothing. She beams anyway. Knowledge often passes from one generation to another in moments so small that they barely seem worth remembering. Yet a lifetime is built from moments exactly like these. You think about everything you have learned since arriving in this ancient world. How to choose dry ground, how to notice the direction of the wind, how to spread fresh grass beneath a sleeping hide, how to recognize the difference between an inviting path and a troublesome one. None of these lessons appeared inside books. Each arrived through observation, correction, practice, patience. Learning moved at the speed of conversation. As evening approaches, the camp settles beside another familiar stand of trees. You have stopped counting the camps now. They blur gently together, connected by rivers, valleys, and countless footsteps, yet each one possesses its own personality. One smelled strongly of pine, another echoed with frogs after sunset, another rested beneath towering cliffs where every voice returned a gentle echo. Home, you realize, is not a single place. It is a pattern, a fire, a meal shared together, the quiet work of preparing for another night, the first stars appearing overhead. Everything else changes. Those things remain. As people begin arranging sleeping places, you notice how quickly experience guides every movement. No one searches for instructions. One person gathers fuel, another clears away loose stones. Children collect armfuls of soft grasses while proudly insisting they have found the very best patches. The adults inspect the results with appropriate admiration. The children leave smiling. A tiny victory before bedtime, if someone from the modern world arrived here without warning. The first thing they might miss would not be electricity. It might be certainty. You rarely know exactly where tomorrow's meal will come from. You cannot assume the weather will cooperate. Comfort depends upon preparation more than convenience. At the same time, there is another certainty that modern life sometimes forgets. You're almost never alone. Work belongs to everyone. So does warmth. So does responsibility. When the fire burns lower, someone quietly adds another branch. When a child becomes sleepy, another pair of hands is always ready to help. When an elder rises stiffly after resting, nobody pretends not to notice. Support flows naturally through the camp, almost like water finding the easiest path downhill. You settle onto your bedding as darkness deepens. The stars seem brighter tonight. Perhaps the air is clearer. Perhaps you're simply paying closer attention, far above. The familiar constellations continue their patient journey across the sky. They watch these travellers. They watch you now. They will watch countless others long after both of you have disappeared. That thought could feel lonely. Instead, it feels comforting. You belong to something much larger than yourself. The fire crackles softly beside you. Smoke rises in a slow ribbon before dissolving into the night. The smooth stone still rests inside your pouch. Tomorrow you may leave it beside another river, or perhaps you'll carry it one day farther. Either way, the journey has already changed you, not because ancient life became easier. It never truly did. But because you learned that comfort is not always found inside walls. Sometimes it lives inside familiar voices, inside practiced hands, inside shared routines repeated beneath an open sky. And perhaps, after all these quiet nights together, That is the oldest kind of home humanity has ever known. You wake before dawn one final time. The camp is almost completely silent. Only the fire remains awake. Its glowing embers pulse gently beneath a blanket of pale ash, breathing in slow rhythms that seem perfectly suited to the sleeping world around you every so often. A tiny spark slips upward into the darkness before fading among the stars. You sit without speaking. There is nothing left to prepare, nothing left to gather, no great lesson waiting just beyond the next hill. Only another quiet morning that feels strangely complete. The air is cool enough to make you pull your hide around your shoulders. Nearby, someone shifts in their sleep. A child murmurs softly before settling again. The older hunter, who always wakes first, has not yet opened his eyes. For once. Even he has granted himself a few extra moments beneath the warmth of his blanket. You look around the camp after so many nights. Every small detail feels familiar. The ring of stones surrounding the fire, bundles resting neatly beside each sleeping place, a bone needle tucked safely into a fold of leather, a wooden bowl turned upside down to keep it clean until morning. None of these objects were made to impress anyone. They exist because they are useful. Yet together they describe an entire way of living. The first light begins touching the eastern horizon. Dark blue gives way to soft grey. Grey slowly becomes pale gold. Birdsong arrives one cautious note at a time, as though the forest itself is stretching after a long night's sleep. You realise something almost surprising. The hardest part of sleeping 12,000 years ago was never just the cold, or the rain, or the insects, or the distant sounds beyond the fire. Those things certainly mattered. Some nights they must have tested every ounce of patience and endurance. But the greatest challenge may have been accepting that comfort was something you created, not something you expected. Warmth came because someone gathered wood before sunset. A dry bed existed because someone collected fresh grasses. A peaceful night depended upon dozens of quiet decisions made long before darkness arrived. Comfort was built, piece by piece, day after day. You think back across all the places where you have rested, a cave whose stone walls softened the wind, a shelter woven from branches, an open camp beneath endless stars, a hillside covered with fragrant pine needles. Each place offered something different. None offered perfection, yet people slept, dreamed, laughed, raised children, shared stories, grew old, moved on. The land changed with every season. Communities change with it. The camp begins waking. Someone stirs the fire. Another person walks toward the spring carrying 2 water skins instead of 1, saving a companion an extra trip. Children emerge one by one, their hair pointing in wonderfully imaginative directions after a night's sleep. One little boy studies a feather that somehow became tangled in his clothing. He looks completely puzzled. No mystery is solved. The feather simply joins the morning. Breakfast unfolds at an easy pace. Nobody seems rushed. The journey ahead will begin soon enough. For now, everyone enjoys the simple pleasure of warmth spreading through cold hands while the sun slowly climbs into the sky. You watch smoke drift upward. It twists gently before disappearing into clear air. By this evening, another campfire may rise somewhere beyond the next valley. The smoke will look almost identical. The people gathered around it may tell different stories. They may hunt different animals, they may know different rivers. Still, many parts of their evening will feel wonderfully familiar. Someone will repair a tool, someone will comfort a tired child, someone will quietly place another branch onto the fire just before sleep. Across countless generations, these small acts stitched human life together far more securely than any wall ever could. The earth remembers only fragments of those evenings. A hearth darkening the soil, a handful of cracked hazelnut shells, a broken spear point left behind by accident. a patch of ash carried gently into the ground by rain. The rest survives somewhere else, in the habits that continued, in the knowledge passed from one voice to another, in the remarkable adaptability that carried people through changing climates, unfamiliar landscapes, and thousands upon thousands of nights beneath open skies. You stand and take one last slow look around. The camp is already beginning to disappear into movement. Bundles are lifted. Footprints multiply across the damp ground. Soon they will lead away toward another valley. By tomorrow, this place may seem almost untouched. Grass will rise again. Leaves will fall. Birds will continue their songs. The forest is patient. It has watched countless travellers arrive and depart without ever needing to remember every name. You smile. That seems perfectly fair, after all. The people who lived here were not trying to become history. They were simply trying to make it through another ordinary day, another ordinary night. And perhaps that is why their lives still feel so close. Ordinary moments are the ones we recognize most easily. A warm fire, a trusted companion, the relief of finally lying down after a long walk, the quiet satisfaction of knowing tomorrow can wait until morning. The sun now stands above the horizon. Golden light fills the valley. Your own time slowly begins returning. The distant hills soften. The ancient camp grows quieter. The scent of wood smoke fades little by little. Soon only the memory remains. When you open your eyes again in your own comfortable room, surrounded by familiar walls, soft bedding, and a roof that keeps away the weather, you may notice those comforts with fresh appreciation, not because modern life is perfect, far from it, but because every peaceful night, whether 12,000 years ago or tonight, has always rested upon the same gentle hope that the darkness will pass, that morning will return, and that somewhere nearby there is enough warmth to carry you through until sunrise. For a little while longer, allow yourself to remain beside that ancient fire. There is nowhere else to be. The valley has grown quiet again. The last voices have faded into the distance, leaving only the soft whisper of the breeze through grass and the gentle crackle of glowing embers. Above you, the stars continue their slow journey across the night, just as they did for countless generations before and after this single camp. Imagine the warmth of the fire reaching your hands one final time. Feel the firm ground beneath you, steady and dependable. Listen to the faint murmur of water flowing over smooth stones nearby. Never hurried, never stopping. The worries of your own day become lighter here. There are no clocks asking anything of you, no messages waiting, no lists left unfinished. Only the quiet rhythm of breathing, the patient turning of the sky, and the comforting thought that people have always sought the same simple gifts. A safe place to rest, familiar faces nearby, enough warmth to greet another sunrise. The embers grow softer. Their orange glow slowly settles into deep shades of red. One by one, they become little points of light, almost like the stars above. The night holds everything gently, and now it can hold you as well. May your thoughts drift as quietly as smoke rising through still air. May your breathing become slow and easy. May your sleep be peaceful, deep and untroubled, carried on the same timeless night that watched over travellers so many thousands of years ago. Sweet dreams,